Hey guys. Tonight we descend into a world of impossible monsters, gods with control issues, and a man who somehow ends up doing a dozen thankless jobs just to make up for a really bad day. You stand on the sun-baked roads of ancient Greece with nothing but a lion pelt, a big stick, and some serious emotional baggage. Before long, you'll be chasing sacred deer, cleaning unholy stables, and literally dragging a three-headed dog out of the underworld. And no, despite what the statues show you, don't always do it shirtless. The truth behind the 12 labors of Heracles is messier, stranger, and more deeply tragic than most bedtime myths let on. Oh, and spoiler, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is there. I love seeing our sleepy little world map grow. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The night isn't quiet. It pulses with heat. And the crickets are screaming like they know something's coming. You stand at the edge of your property in Thebes, your knuckles white around a club that's more sentimental than practical. You don't remember exactly when the red fog took you, only that it was Hera's doing. Again, you'd been doing everything right. Or so you thought. Raised well by King Amphitryon and Queen Alcmene. Trained in music, archery, and diplomacy, which frankly never took. And eventually married to Megara, with whom you had beautiful children. Maybe too beautiful, because that's the thing about your stepmother. Hera, she hates perfection if it's not hers. And she never forgave Zeus for fathering you. Not once. So when she finds her opening when your ego's high and your guard's low, she floods your mind with a madness so complete, so intimate. You don't even recognize your family until it's too late. You wake up surrounded by blood. Your own sons lie at your feet. Megara's silence is absolute. The horror doesn't arrive all at once. It trickles in, like cold water on hot skin. You don't scream. You can't. You just walk. You become a phantom in your own life, wandering from temple to temple, not eating, not speaking, just listening to whispers. Some say you fled Thebes out of shame. Others say you were cursed. A few brave drunkards say you were always like this half-monster, half-man. But one truth rises above the noise: you need penance. Real penance. And not the kind that involves fasting or prayer. No. The kind that hurts. You find yourself crawling up the rocky path to the Oracle of Delphi. The smell of goats and burnt laurel in the air. The Pythia, high on fumes, doesn't look at you, but she laughs a deep, rattling laugh that makes your spine itch. Go serve your cousin, she says. Eurystheus of Tyrants. Do whatever he tells you. No matter how small, no matter how vile. Only then can you be cleansed. You stare at her, waiting for more. But she's gone. Eyes rolled back. Mouth slack. The room spins like you've stepped inside a riddle. And so you obey. Now let's pause here, because this is where things start getting weird. Eurystheus isn't just your cousin. He's a nervous, fidgety little king who got the throne because Hera sped up his birth and delayed yours. Yeah. She made sure you popped out a little late so he would be the rightful ruler. Petty, sure. Effective, absolutely. And now, here you are, a walking wall of muscle. Voluntarily, offering yourself up to him, he almost chokes on his figs when you arrive. 12 tasks, he says. After consulting with Hera, you complete them, and you're free. Then he adds, and I decide when one counts, or not. Historians still argue whether Eurystheus made the list himself or simply passed down Hera's divine sabotage. Either way, you don't get a vote, and so you set down your club and cloak and prepare. You're no longer Prince Heracles of Thebes. You're just a servant, a tool, a myth in the making. But gods, are you tired? You dream that night of a lion giant, golden and laughing. You can feel the heat of its breath on your cheek. It speaks in your father's voice. It won't get easier, son, but it will get stranger. You wake up sweaty, tangled in blankets like vines. The first labor awaits. You travel west to Nemea, where farmers whisper about a lion that devours flocks and shepherds alike. Normal lions aren't usually in the people-eating business. But this one's different. No spear can pierce its hide. Its paws leave craters in the earth. Some say it fell from the moon. Others say it's Hera's pet. Either way, it's killing morale and sheep in equal measure. You follow the trail bones. Shredded cloaks. A shepherd's flute cracked in half. The air is thick with rot and challenge. Your bow is useless. Of course, the first few arrows bounce off its hide like pebbles. It watches you with eerie calm, blinking slowly, as if you're the one being studied. So you drop the bow. You tighten your grip on your club. You grin. Fine. You mutter, let's do this the hard way. The fight is brutal. You're slammed against trees, buried in thorns, dragged across rocks. The lion moves like a nightmare. No wasted motion. No hesitation. But you've trained for this. You've fought worse. Or so you thought. Your club shatters. Your fists bleed. Eventually, if you wrap your arms around its neck and squeeze until your vision goes red again, not from madness this time, but from raw, roaring will. When the beast slumps, finally limp, you collapse beside it. There's blood in your ears, sap in your hair, and dirt in every crevice of your soul. Skinning it, that's another problem. Your knives don't work, so you use one of the lion's own claws, jagged and glinting, to strip the hide. That's the first clever thing you've done in weeks. Later, you'll wear it like a second skin, the head resting atop yours like a grotesque crown. It smells awful, but it works. Eurystheus is not pleased. When you return, dragging the carcass behind you, he screams, runs into a storage jar, and refuses to come out for hours. You stand there awkwardly, brushing flies off your shoulder, waiting. Eventually, a trembling servant informs you that the labor counts. Barely. And also, please never come back without warning. You leave Tiryns and walk into the next dawn. Heavier than before. The lion's hide clings to you. But it's your guilt that truly weighs you down. 1 down. 11 to go. And you can already feel Hera smiling somewhere. Planning. The road to the second labor begins before your bruises from the first have even faded. Your muscles ache in ways you didn't know they could. And there's still a lion claw lodged in your satchel. Half wrapped in a strip of linen, you tore from your own cloak. It jingles when you walk. You'd throw it away. But something about it reminds you never again underestimate anything that growls. Eurystheus, naturally, has no plans to make this easier. After that whole hiding in a jar situation, he's become extra paranoid, even drafting up sealed scrolls so you can't misinterpret his next tasks. He hands you one through a curtain without making eye contact. You unroll it right there in the courtyard, still wearing your lion hide like a bathrobe you refuse to return. The Lernaean Hydra. It reads, in looping, overconfident ink. Destroy it completely. No remains. No regeneration. No assistance allowed. And no coming back smelling like swamp water. You sigh. No promises. So you set off for Lake Lerna, a place known less for scenic picnics and more for curses, unspeakable rituals, and a certain many-headed reptile that doesn't like visitors. It's said the Hydra was raised by Hera herself, a serpentine child she placed in the marsh to grow fat on cattle, fish, and unsuspecting fishermen. But don't worry, some say the creature can't move far from its den. Of course, others say it sprouts legs when the moon is full. So great. The air thickens as you approach the swamp. It smells like mildew and secrets. And your boots sink with every step. Dragonflies the size of your thumb buzz around your head. And somewhere, unseen, frogs croak like distant laughter. You squint through the green fog. Something's hissing. No. Wait. Everything's hissing. And then you see it. The Hydra rises like a wave. One head after another unfurling, like angry banners. Some have 2 eyes. Others, 3. A few have none at all. All of them bear fangs. You count 9. Or 11. They don't stay still long enough for math. You duck just in time as one lunges, snapping inches from your nose. You try your sword first. Big mistake. You slice off a head cleanly, only to watch 2 more sprout in its place like vengeful mushrooms. Ah. You mutter. So that's the trick. Some scholars argue this regeneration is a metaphor for political instability. Cut off one rebellious faction, and 2 more take its place. Others believe it's a warning about pest control. Either way, it's a terrible feature for a monster. You retreat briefly, swatting at vines and spitting out a mouthful of swamp muck. That's when you remember Aeolus, your nephew, your sometimes sidekick, and possibly the only person who still thinks you're salvageable. He tagged along despite Eurystheus's no-help clause, mostly to carry snacks and heckle you when you got dramatic. Try fire. He yells from a rock. Burn the stumps. You blink. That might work. You bait the Hydra again, chopping heads and yelling for Iolaus to do his part. He rushes forward with a burning torch and cauterizes each wound before the next can regrow. The smell is indescribable, like singed eel mixed with bad decisions. One by one, the heads fall. Some scream. One tries to bite its own stump in confusion. Eventually, only one remains, the immortal head in the center. The one Hera gave her special touch. You hesitate. This one doesn't roar. It watches you with quiet fury. And when you finally drive your sword through its throat, there's no blood, only smoke. You bury the head deep beneath a boulder, not wanting it to whisper to you later in your dreams. From the Hydra's bile, do you collect a foul-smelling liquid to dip your arrows in? That part wasn't on Eurystheus's scroll. But you've stopped caring. If the king wants results, he's going to get them. Back in Tyrans, Eurystheus reads the report and frowns. You had help, he says. You nod. Technically, yes. Then it doesn't count. E declares, folding his arms with all the conviction of a man who has never seen a venomous swamp monster devour a deer in one gulp. You consider flattening his palace with your bare hands. But instead you shrug. Fine. Add another to the list. Give me more monsters. I've got nothing but time. That's when he panics and sends you after something sacred. Your next labor involves a deer sounds gentle. Right. But it's not just any deer. It's the Cyrenian hind. A glowing, golden creature, sacred to Artemis herself. She's fast. She's beautiful. And she's absolutely not yours to touch. The catch, Eurystheus wants her alive and delivered. You're to go fetch a goddess's personal pet, without angering the goddess. Easy. You travel north this time. Into mountain passes and forests that never lose their mist. For months you track the hind through frozen rivers, across icy ridges, and once through a village where the locals try to worship you because they think your lion cloak is a constellation. The hind always stays just out of reach. She doesn't run blindly, she leads you, as if she's testing your patience. And honestly, you're failing. It takes a full year to finally catch her. You don't use brute force. You wait. You bait. You lull her into a glade with apples and reeds. And when she leans down to drink, you net her with a trap so gentle it could snare a dream. She thrashes, but you whisper calming words, half prayer, half apology. That's when Artemis arrives. She steps from the trees like moonlight solidified, and you almost drop your spear. She doesn't shout. She doesn't raise a bow. She simply looks at you. You dare hunt what is mine. You drop to your knees. Hind, still trapped. I had no choice. She circles, silent. Then, after a breathless moment, she says, then return her, and don't look back. You do. You let the hind go and walk backwards until the trees swallow her golden glow. Eurystheus gets a story instead of a trophy. You tell him the truth. More or less. You caught the hind. Yes. And she's alive. But Artemis intervened. What was he going to do, argue with a goddess? He stamps his feet and sulks, but he accepts it. You suspect it's because Artemis sent him a dream. One that involved him being turned into a mule. 3 down. 9 to go. And you're beginning to notice something. These labors, they aren't random. They test different parts of you. Strength. Strategy. Restraint. It's not about bashing heads. Not always. And Hera, she's watching. Always watching. Each success just sharpens her next trap. You don't even get a chance to rest before the 4th labor is handed down like another rude note slipped under your door. No audience with Eurystheus this time, just a scroll with shaky lettering and what appears to be a greasy fig smear. Bring back the Erymanthian boar. It says, alive. As if capturing a 10-foot-tall squealing rage pig is just a normal Tuesday chore. You sigh, tuck it into your belt, and adjust your lion pelt, which has started to smell like heroic mildew. No one warns you that divine revenge reeks of old hide and despair. The road to Mount Erymanthos is steep and snow-choked. Even in late autumn, you trudge upward, every breath frosting the air. The trees grow sparse. The ground turns to ice-crusted rock. And even the goats look at you like you've lost your mind. They're not wrong. What you're doing is less mission and more sick joke. and everyone's in on it except you. Halfway up, you take shelter with an old friend, Pholus, the centaur. His cave is warm. Lined with furs and stacks of scrolls, he insists you read. You do not. He serves roasted chestnuts and a mild red wine from a sacred jug. Just one cup. He warns. It belongs to all the centaurs. You nod. Pour a single ladleful. And sip. And that's when things go sideways. You should have remembered what happened the last time someone shared divine wine. The scent alone carries through the hills. Within minutes, a horde of centaurs thunder toward the cave like a bar brawl on horseback. They're furious, half drunk already from scent alone, and they're armed with branches, stones, and a few tragic musical instruments. What follows is chaos. You fight, but not to kill, mostly to get them to stop hitting you with lyres. One centaur throws a pine cone. Another recites angry poetry. Arrows fly. Torches burn. At some point, poor Pholus gets fatally wounded, ironically, by one of your poisoned arrows. Dropped mid-fight. You cradle him as he whispers something about trusting humans too much. Then he dies dramatically on a pile of dictionaries. You wish you could say this was the strangest part of your week. But no. You still have a boar to catch. The Erymanthian boar is not subtle. You hear it long before you see it snorting, snarling, plowing through drifts of snow like an avalanche with legs. It's angry, territorial, and inexplicably fast. Some villagers claim it was born when Ares cursed a pig. Others say it's possessed by a frost spirit. Historians still argue whether it was a literal creature or a metaphor for barbarian tribes living in the mountains. Either way, it's a nightmare. You track it for days. Slipping on ice. Dodging trees it tears down in fury. Then you catch it, sort of. You leap from a rock, grab it by the tusks, and are immediately regretting all your life choices. The boar screams. You scream. It's a duet of chaos. You manage to wrestle it into a snowdrift, tying its legs with thick rope while it thrashes like a godless accordion. Dragging it down the mountain is somehow worse. It squeals the whole way. You lose a sandal. You lose 2 teeth. You very nearly lose your sanity. But by the time you arrive at Tiryns, covered in bruises and smelling like frozen ham, the boar is still very much alive and very much not happy. Eurystheus doesn't even look at you. He peeks from behind a pillar, sees the snarling mass of fur and muscle, and immediately dives back into his jar. You shout, 4 down over the boar's shrieks, and walk away like you've just dropped off dry cleaning. The 5th labor seems easier. On paper, anyway. The Augean stables. The scroll reads, clean them. In 1 day. No divine assistance. You raise an eyebrow. You've fought monsters, wrestled boars, and charmed goddesses, but this is janitorial work. Then you arrive and realize how wrong you were. The stables of King Augeas are not just large, they're absurd. Home to over 1,000 immortal cattle. They've not been cleaned in decades. The ground is layered with dung, so thick it fossilizes mid-step. The smell is unspeakable. The flies have their own kingdom. You try not to breathe. And fail. Your boots squelch in protest. Augeas himself greets you with a smirk and a wager. If you do this, he says, I'll give you 1/10 of my herd. That perks you up. Then he adds, but no tricks. You agree. Already scheming, you study the terrain, walk the perimeter, and suddenly, an idea strikes. 2 rivers run nearby. If you could divert them, you break out a pickaxe and start digging channels. The work is brutal. Blisters bloom. Mud cakes your legs. But by sundown, the rivers flood through the stables, washing decades of divine manure into the sea. You finish, triumphant, soaked, and only a little dead inside. When you return to Augeas for your reward, he laughs. You cheated. He says, you used rivers. You stare. I cleaned your stables. In one day, I fulfilled the terms, but not the spirit of the task. He smirks. You can practically hear Hera giggling in the clouds, back in Tiryns. Eurystheus agrees. It doesn't count. It declares. Probably while hiding behind a curtain. Too clever. Try again. You grind your teeth and say nothing. Hera doesn't want you dead. She wants you humiliated. She wants you reduced to errands and muck. You're starting to suspect the labors aren't punishment, they're performance. The 6th task comes like a change in key. No beasts this time. No rulers. Just birds. Horrible. Flesh-eating. Metal-feathered birds with wings like razors and screeches that shatter windows. The Stymphalian birds roost in a marsh that swallows horses, and apparently they're multiplying. You arrive with caution. The swamp is still and glassy, but you know they're watching. The sky flickers. A shadow drops. A feather lands at your feet, sharp enough to split bark. You look up. They're perched in the trees, hundreds of them. Eyes gleaming. Feathers rustling like knives. You try arrows, but they deflect. You try shouting, but they mock you. For a moment, you consider fire, but then, in a rare stroke of fortune, you remember Athena once gifted you a noise-making contraption clappers forged by Hephaestus, used to frighten wild creatures. You pull it from your satchel. It looks ridiculous, like bronze castanets fused with a cowbell. You don't care. You begin to clang it together. The birds panic. They shriek and rise, darkening the sky like a plague. You fire poisoned arrows into the frenzied cloud, and several drop with satisfying thuds. The rest flee toward the coast. Hopefully, into someone else's myth. Later, poets will say you defeated them all with your bow, but you'll remember the clappers, and the blisters, and the fact that bird feathers should never sound like daggers on stone. Eurystheus, mercifully, accepts this one. No har. No complaints. Maybe he hates birds too. Half the labor's done. 6 out of 12. And already, your legend is growing. Children cheer when you pass. Bards sing of your strength, but they don't see the cracks. They don't see how tired you are, how every monster you kill leaves a part of you hollow. You once sought redemption. Now you're just trying to outpace the stories. You wake up sore in places you didn't know had names. And once again, there's a scroll shoved rudely into your hands. The king's handwriting is even worse than usual, like he wrote it while sneezing. Capture the Cretan bull, it says, which sounds almost civilized compared to your usual monster of the week routine. You picture a sturdy, well-behaved farm animal, with nice manners and a manageable temper. You're wrong. Cretan mythology is like a buffet of awkward family drama. Divine meddling and questionable livestock choices. This bull in particular gift from Poseidon. White as sea foam, strong as a tempest, and very much not just a regular bull. It was meant to be sacrificed by King Minos of Crete as a thank you note to the gods. Naturally, Minos looked at the majestic animal and said, "Too pretty to kill," which, as you know by now, never goes over well with the divine. Poseidon was not amused, so he made the bull go wild, trampling fields, smashing vineyards, and generally ruining everyone's week. Then, just to turn the awkwardness up to 11, he cursed Minos's wife with an intense fondness for the bull. Yes, that story, the one that leads to the birth of the Minotaur in a future footnote. Ancient myths don't pull punches, they come at you with hooves, horns, and way too much innuendo. Anyway, your job is to go to Crete and catch the beast. Alive. Obviously. Dead bulls don't impress Eurystheus. So you board a creaky boat, sail across storm-tossed seas, thanks, Poseidon, and land on Crete's white shores with salt in your beard and another headache brewing. King Minos greets you with the kind of expression usually reserved for annoying in-laws. He knows who you are, knows why you're here, and honestly, he seems amused. "You're welcome to try," he says. "Just don't break anything expensive." You nod, adjust your lion pelt, and try not to think about the stable that allegedly once housed a giant wooden cow. Minos offers no help, of course, but some locals whisper directions. The bull was last seen near the cliffs above Knossos, charging at waves and mooing in existential frustration. You find him at sunrise, stomping a wild orchard into cider. He's huge, all muscle and myth, his white coat gleaming like polished marble. His eyes catch yours, and immediately you realize this will not be a peaceful negotiation. The bull charges. You dive, roll, and narrowly avoid being flattened like a heroic pancake. For the next hour, it's a dusty ballet of near misses. You can't wrestle him like the boar. He's too fast, too clever, and definitely not into cuddles. Eventually, you spot a ravine. If you can lure him into the bottleneck, maybe, just maybe, you can pin him against the rock. You bait him with the red fabric from your ruined cloak, a trick that will one day inspire bullfighting and run like Hades himself is chasing you. The bull follows. You leap across the narrow chasm. He charges in, and just as he skids, you grab his horns, twist, and slam his weight against the cliff wall. The ground shakes. The bull bellows. You press your forehead to his and whisper, "Shh." He calms. Kind of. It takes every ounce of strength to keep him subdued as you tie a thick rope around his massive neck. Then, you lead him slowly, carefully back to the beach, where a very anxious sailor waits with a very small boat. You bribe him with wine. Lots of wine. The return voyage is tense. The bull doesn't like the sea. The sea doesn't like you. You spend most of it knee-deep in seawater, trying to stop the beast from capsizing the boat. At one point, he bites the mast. When you finally reach Tiryns, you're soaked, bruised, and down a sandal again. But the bull is alive. Eurystheus doesn't even come out this time. He takes one look, lets out a squeal, and orders the bull to be released. So it ends up wandering to Marathon, where it starts terrorizing Attica until someone else deals with it. Typical bureaucracy. Then comes Labor 7. You're starting to think Eurystheus is just throwing darts at a board now. Because this one reads, "Bring me the mares of Diomedes." You scratch your head. Mars sounds sweet. Pastoral. How hard can it be? Very hard. Because these aren't just horses. They're man-eating horses. As in, actual carnivores. Trained by a Thracian king named Diomedes, who thinks feeding strangers to stallions is peak hospitality. Thrace is cold, muddy, and full of angry warriors who don't like uninvited guests. You sneak in under cover of night, locate the stables, and instantly regret your life choices. The horses are massive, snorting steam, and surrounded by piles of bones. One of them gnaws on a boot. You hope it wasn't still attached to someone. Diomedes finds you. Of course. And he's not thrilled. A brawl breaks out. As expected. His soldiers swarm you. But you've been through worse. With a yell and a swing of your club. Now, more patches than wood. You fight your way through, and end up facing Diomedes himself on a beach. Now, there are versions of the story where you feed Diomedes to his own horses. It's poetic justice, irony on a platter. But some sources suggest you only stunned him, then teed him up. Historians still argue whether you delivered the final blow or just let the mares handle it. Either way, Diomedes ends up chewed. With their master gone, the mares calm down. Turns out they just needed a better diet, and someone who didn't treat them like lawnmowers from Tartarus. You lead them slowly back toward the sea, wondering how you became a delivery service for cursed livestock. Eurystheus sees them, and immediately orders them sent away. They're eventually set free to wander Argos. One ends up in a tragic romance with a war chariot. But that's another tale. 8 down. And now, just when you think things might start making sense, Eurystheus hands you a task that involves fashion, diplomacy, and Amazons. He wants you to bring him the girdle of Hippolyta, queen of the warrior women. Not just a belt, but a magical symbol of her authority. Rumored to have been a gift from Ares himself. You prepare for battle. But when you arrive in Themyscira, the Amazon capital, you're greeted, not with spears, but curiosity. Hippolyta meets you in full armor, sharp-eyed and regal. She knows why you're here, and surprisingly, she agrees to give you the girdle peacefully. She respects your strength, maybe even admires your cause. You're stunned. For the first time, you think, this might go smoothly. Then Hera interferes. She whispers to the Amazons that you plan to kidnap their queen, that your peace is a trick. Panic erupts. Swords flash. The sky darkens. Hippolyta herself looks betrayed. And, before you can explain, battle consumes the shore. You fight not to kill, but to survive. The Amazons are fierce, fast, and angry. You lose count of how many times you're nearly disarmed. But eventually, Hippolyta falls. You kneel beside her, heart heavy, and take the girdle not as a trophy, but as a symbol of failed trust. When you return, Eurystheus is gleeful. He doesn't ask what it cost you. He doesn't care. He hangs the girdle on a wall like a hunting prize. You say nothing, because you're starting to realize something terrifying. This isn't redemption anymore. It's erasure. They want to turn you into something flat. Digestible. A statue with no cracks. 9 down. and you haven't even touched the underworld yet. You think you've earned at least one normal morning. Just one, but instead, the rooster crows, and another scroll thuds against your door like an insult wrapped in papyrus. Eurystheus has scribbled across it in larger-than-usual lettering, as if volume could make up for cowardice. Bring me the cattle of Geryon. From the farthest edge of the world. That's it. No detail. No map. Not even a travel snack. You squint at the horizon. Far edge of the world. Huh. Couldn't possibly be. Say. 2 farms over. Of course not. Geryon lives in Erythea, a mythical red island thought to be near the edge of Oceanus, basically ancient code for somewhere around modern Spain. Assuming you survive long enough to invent it. So you start walking west. Just west. Forever west. You pass dry plains. Steep cliffs. Haunted-looking trees. The sun bakes your back. Birds laugh at you, and somewhere along the way, you run out of sandals. Again. Eventually, you hit a desert. Not just a desert, the desert. No shade. No water. Just hot sand and your own grumbling thoughts. That's when you do something absolutely unhinged. You get angry at the sun. Really angry. You squint upward and start yelling at it like it's a lazy charioteer, taking personal joy in roasting you. You hurl your club at the sky. You threaten to shoot it with an arrow. And for a wild moment, the heavens go still. The air pauses. And then, miraculously, the sun god Helios takes pity on you. Instead of smiting you for cosmic sass, he gives you a golden cup. Not a drinking cup. A sailing cup. Big enough to carry you across Oceanus. Historians still argue whether this golden cup was meant literally, metaphorically, or if Helios was just bad at scale. But you climb in. Adjust your lion cloak for wind resistance. And let the current carry you west. You arrive at Erythea under blood-orange clouds. The land is strange red soil. Black cliffs. Air that smells faintly of copper. It feels like a place on the verge of myth. And waiting for you are 3 problems. The first is Orthrus, a 2-headed dog guarding the cattle. It snarls twice as much and bites with twice the regret. You handle him with a well-aimed club swing. No poetry. Just physics. The second is Eurytion, the herdsman, who's less violent and more deeply confused about why you're here. You try diplomacy. He tries stabbing. You sigh and knock him out gently. He'll wake up someday, hopefully wiser. Then comes Geryon. He doesn't arrive with a roar, but with footsteps that thump like war drums. He's massive 3 torsos, 3 grim faces, 6 arms holding 6 weapons. His skin glows faintly red, as if sunburned by Helios himself. He's not here to talk. He's here to protect his cattle and his pride. You meet him in the center of the island. Muscles aching. Weapons low. It's not a fight. It's a siege. His blades clang. His arms whirl. And you're blocking attacks from all angles like a sleep-deprived windmill. You dodge. Parry. Feint. You scream once when he catches your shoulder. He laughs a sound like bronze cracking. But then, in a moment of mad brilliance, you fire one of your Hydra poisoned arrows straight into his central chest. The poison works fast. Geryon falls slowly. Like a collapsing temple, he hits the ground with a sound that shakes the cliffs. You sit there a while, covered in sand and blood and divine goo, wondering what you've become. Hero, assassin, professional cattle thief. You round up the herd fat, red-coated cows with perfectly curled horns, and steer them onto your golden cup boat. They moo the whole way home. One licks your face. You're too tired to care. When you reach Tiryns, Eurystheus almost doesn't believe it. He inspects each cow with the suspicion of a bad accountant. They smell weird. He says, "That's how you know they're divine." You reply, "The next labor comes with less cow dung and more fruit. Retrieve the golden apples of the Hesperides." The scroll reads. You blink. Where are they? No answer. Eurystheus shrugs and mutters something about figuring it out. Fantastic. So you begin yet another trek into the unknown. The apples are sacred, glowing fruits of immortality guarded by the Hesperides, nymphs of the western dusk. And, oh yes, there's also a dragon, a 100-headed dragon named Ladon, who never sleeps. You don't know where the garden is. Exactly. No one does. So you do what any sensible demigod would ask around. You visit old prophets, wrestle cryptic river gods, and finally stumble upon Prometheus, the guy chained to a rock, having his liver pecked out by an eagle on loop. He's thrilled to see you. You kill the bird, break his chains, and he gives you directions as thanks. It's weirdly wholesome, but when you arrive at the edge of the world again, you realize something else is waiting for you, Atlas. Yes, that Atlas, the one holding up the sky like a cosmic barbell. You find him groaning beneath the celestial weight, and you offer a deal. You'll hold it for a bit. If he fetches the apples, he agrees, maybe too eagerly. And so, for the first time in your life, you become a pillar. The sky bears down on your shoulders. It's heavier than sin, than grief, than guilt. You grit your teeth and wait. Time blurs. Then, finally, Atlas returns with apples. And a grin. I'll deliver them, he says, stretching his back. You stay here. Nice try. You smile politely. Can you just hold the sky for a second while I adjust my cloak? He nods. You hand it back. Then you grab the apples and bolt. He roars in frustration. But what's he going to do? Chase you while holding up the cosmos. You deliver the apples. Eurystheus looks at them. Then at you. Are they safe to eat? You stare at him. Only if you want to live forever with indigestion. He has them returned to the gods. And now, the underworld calls, the final labor on the list officially. Anyway, bring me Cerberus. The king writes, alive. You don't even bother asking why. You just grab a flask, kiss the earth goodbye, and head for the gates of Hades. The air grows colder with every step. Trees thin. Rivers darken. Eventually, you reach the river Styx. Charon greets you with dry sarcasm and a long pole. You pay him with a drachma you've kept hidden in your sandal. He pretends not to smell it. The journey across is silent. Souls ripple below the surface. One tries to climb aboard. You gently nudge it off with your club. Charon snorts. At the gates, you meet Hades. Surprisingly calm. Surprisingly bored. He knows who you are. Knows why you've come. He agrees on one condition: no weapons. You must subdue Cerberus with nothing but strength. You nod. Of course. Cerberus emerges from the gloom like a natural disaster. 3 heads, each with snarling jaws. A body like a black avalanche. He's not evil, just doing his job. You whisper soothing words. Then pounce. It's not elegant. He bites. You dodge. He roars. You scream right back. Eventually, you wrap your arms around his thick necks, one at a time, and hold. You wrestle. You breathe. He thrashes, until finally he stops. He doesn't fall. He just relents. You drag him upward, out of shadow, out of myth, into sunlight. Tyrann's is never ready for you. But this time they're really not ready for a three-headed dog the size of a cart. Eurystheus shrieks. Take it back. You do. You walk Cerberus calmly back to the underworld. Give him a good scratch. And whisper. Thanks. He licks your face with 3 tongues, 12 labors, 12 legends. But somehow, you know it isn't really over. The heir and Tyrann's should be celebratory. You've completed 12 impossible tasks, stared down monsters, gods, and bureaucracy with equal contempt, and survived. Just barely. But instead of a feast or a golden laurel, or even a decent nap, you're met with a whimper from behind a curtain and the unmistakable sound of Eurystheus dragging his sandals into a fresh panic. You don't even need the scroll this time. He pops his head out just long enough to squeak. 2 of the labors didn't count. Then he ducks back in. Of course, the Hydra. Because you had help. And the Augean stables. Because apparently using your brain is a form of cheating. You don't argue. You don't even groan. You just wait for the inevitable thump of another rolled-up punishment landing at your feet. And here it is. Steal the cattle of Geryon. Already did that. Bring back Cerberus. Already done. Now, go deal with the petty politics of Olympus itself. That part is new. Eurystheus sends you off to mop up after the gods. Apparently, Olympus is displeased with how mortal hands have been handling divine errands, and you've become the preferred blunt instrument, not an official labor, but certainly not optional. So now, instead of monsters, you face something far more treacherous gossip. Divine gossip. First stop Delphi. Again, the oracle has requested your presence more like demanded it. Honestly, you arrive to find the Pythia mid-trance, babbling about broken balance and sacred relics gone missing. You nod slowly, pretending to understand. She points you toward Dodona, where Zeus's oracle once whispered through oak leaves. Something's been stolen there. Something shiny and sentimental. You travel north. The road is unusually quiet, and your footsteps crunch over fallen acorns and uneasy silence. When you arrive, the priests are panicking. One of Hera's sacred bronze tripods, ceremonial, heavy, and apparently enchanted, is gone. Vanished. Dagon. They suspect. By a rival cult. Maybe a faction of Dionysians who got bored with wine and turned to petty theft. You investigate, which now means interviewing druids, decoding dream fragments, and surviving 3 poorly choreographed ambushes. Eventually, you find the tripod being used as a wine mixing bowl in some backwoods shrine full of ecstatic dancers and badly tuned flutes. They don't want to give it up. You don't want to fight, so you propose a trade. You tell them the tale of how you fought the Hydra, how its blood still stains your arrows. You tell them about the golden apples, the boat-sized cup, the time you yelled at the sun. They're riveted. One faint. One tries to write it all down using goat ink. By the time you're done, they hand you the tripod just so you'll tell them another story. You leave with it over your shoulder and the unsettling realization that you're becoming something else, something larger than yourself. Not just a man, a myth. You return it to Dodona. The wind rustles. The oak leaves whisper your name. Then comes the weird one. Some scribe has been spreading unauthorized tales of your labors. You first hear about it in a tavern. A bard is singing a ballad where you marry Hippolyta and raise a family of half-Amazons who ride flying horses and shoot fire. It's flattering. But wrong. You correct him. Gently. But word spreads. Other versions pop up. In one, you and Cerberus become roommates. In another, the boar becomes your loyal pet and learns to read. Historians still argue whether these alternate tales reflect real oral traditions or just very creative poets trying to cash in on your name. Either way, you realize something. Your story is no longer yours. You confront the scribe, a shaky man with ink-stained fingers, and a scroll longer than most legal disputes. Why, you ask? He shrugs. People like it. You don't punch him, but you do request that he write down what really happened, all of it. The blood, the regret, the losses, even the parts where you cried. Especially those, make me human again. You whisper. He nods. Scribbling furiously, you travel next to Corinth, where a new statue of you has been erected in the central square. You stand there, staring up at yourself. The sculptor got the muscles right. Sure, but the expression, that triumphant grin, that heroic chin, that's not you. That's what people want to see. Not the tired man who wrestled a lion in a cave and smelled like swamp for weeks. You talk to the sculptor. He's young, idealistic. You don't have to make me pretty. You tell him, make me real. He looks confused, but real doesn't sell. You leave. Next, you're summoned, yes. Summoned to Athens. The city wants to host a festival in your honor. They even wrote a play. You sit through it. Cringing as an actor, in a lion mask, flounces across stage, yelling lines like, I shall cleanse these stables with naught but a broom of justice. It gets a standing ovation. Afterward, a child tugs at your cloak. Is it true you fought the sun? You pose. Then kneel beside him. No. You say gently, I just yelled at it. He giggles. You ruffle his hair. That night, you sit on a rooftop, watching the stars. You can almost trace your own silhouette in the constellations Orion, Perseus, all your cosmic cousins. You wonder if you'll end up there. 2. Another story in the sky. Then, without warning, a familiar voice slithers into your thoughts. Hera. She's not speaking through clouds or thunder this time. Just presence. A whisper. A chill. A question. Was it worth it? You don't answer, because honestly, you're not sure yet. The next day, you walk through a village where your name is painted on walls. Kids chant it in skipping rhymes. A baker names a new pastry, after you Heracles honey puffs. You buy one. It's dry. You keep moving. Because now, the stories chase you. One man insists you taught him how to fish. Another swears he saw you leap a mountain in one bound. You smile politely. But inside, you ache. You fought monsters. Yes. But you lost your wife, your children, yourself. People forget that part. You begin to write your own version on scraps of bark, on cave walls, in the margins of temple guest books. You write the truth. the dirt under your nails, the fear before the first arrow flies, the loneliness of being the strongest man alive and still not enough to stop what happened to your family. You write it all, and then you vanish for a while. No one knows where you go. Some say north, to the mountains. Others claim you visited the Hyperboreans, those mysterious northern people, said to live in peace and endless sunlight. Historians still argue whether the Hyperboreans were myth, metaphor, or an ancient tourist trap. You just wanted quiet. But you don't get it for long, because when you return, Eurystheus greets you with another scroll. This one isn't about monsters or quests. It's about politics. You're famous, he says. We can use that. He wants you to serve as envoy, symbol, maybe even general. You laugh so hard it echoes. But eventually, you agree, because if you don't shape the story, someone else will. And you've learned what happens then. The politics begins slowly, like a creeping vine, winding around your ankles while you're still trying to remember what it felt like to sleep in a bed that didn't smell like boar fur and divine disappointment. Eurystheus sends you to parley with kings who previously laughed at your name. Now they roll out olive branches and roasted lambs. You are, officially, a man of diplomacy. Unofficially, you still prefer clubs. Your first assignment: negotiate peace between two squabbling city-states, Elis and Pisa, arguing over land, trade, and which river belongs to whom. The rivers themselves don't seem to care. But the humans are passionate about mud rights. You're greeted with an awkward banquet, where both kings try to impress you with bad poetry and worse wine. One gifts you a goat. The other gifts you a statue of yourself that somehow makes you look constipated. After 3 days of this nonsense, you bang your goblet on the table and declare, "Whoever can beat me at arm wrestling gets the land." They both lose. The treaty is signed the next morning. It's not how Athena would have done it, but it works. From there, things spiral. Suddenly, you're a judge at games, a guest of honor at every temple festival, and even asked to bless a few crops, which you do by standing near them and flexing. To your horror, the yield increases. Must be divine. The farmers whisper. You suspect it's just good irrigation. But your fame is no longer just songs and stories. It's becoming law. Cities name streets after you. Thebes requests a statue where your club is taller than the actual building. A sculptor from Argos insists on painting your likeness on every single amphora. For the aesthetic, he says, as if your biceps have become public property, you retreat, briefly, to a mountain village. The air is clean, the olives firm, and no one knows your name. You help build a roof, milk a goat, sit quietly with a widow who thinks you're just another traveler with tired eyes. It's peaceful, but short-lived. A runner arrives, breathless and pale, holding yet another scroll. Eurystheus. Again, except this time, it isn't an errand. It's a threat. A minor king, Lycus, has usurped the throne of Thebes in your absence, claiming your deeds were lies, your strength exaggerated, your family dishonored. Worse, he's imprisoned your mother, Alcmene. She's still alive, just barely. That's all it takes. You don't even grab your club. You just leave. When you arrive at the city gates, they open without resistance. The people part like sea foam, whispering your name as if it's a spell. Lycus steps forward, sneering, armored in borrowed bravado. "You're late," he says. "No." You answer. "You're done." It's not a fight. It's a reminder. You lift him with one hand, toss him down the steps, like yesterday's trash. And the people cheer, loudly. You don't smile. You free your mother. Her eyes are dimmer, her face thinner, but her spirit unbent. She touches your cheek, sighs, and says, "You look tired." You bury your head in her lap. That night, the city holds a feast in your honor. Again, but this time, you make a speech. You thank them for their trust. You ask them to honor not just you, but every family harmed in your absence. You raise a toast to forgiveness. People weep. The next morning, you vanish again. Before the artists arrive, before the marble gets carved, it's not that you hate fame, it's that it lies. It tells people you're untouchable, that you never fail, that you're not haunted by the sound of snapping heads or the memory of Megara's last smile. Fame erases the human parts. The trembling, the self-doubt, the nights you sat in caves whispering apologies to the ghosts of your sons. You travel next to Caledon, where a boar, another one, has been terrorizing the region. They didn't ask for help, but you go anyway. This one isn't divine. Just angry, just large, just confused. You trap it with clever rope work and a bit of persuasion involving figs. When it calms, you pet its bristled back and release it far from humans. Sometimes, violence isn't needed. Sometimes, a snack is enough. Word spreads that Heracles has gone soft. You let them believe it. Then, a war breaks out. Small, but bloody. Two neighboring city-states, again, arguing over the boundaries of a sacred grove. This time, you try words, letters, mediators. Nothing works, so you march between them. Unarmed, bare-chested, your lion pelt flapping behind like a warning. You stand in the center of the field as both armies line up. Spears gleaming, chariots, tents. You raise your voice. If you want to spill blood, start with mine. Silence, one by one. Shields lower. Someone drops a spear, then another. The battle never happens. They call it a miracle. You call it progress. Still, not everyone is pleased. Some generals accuse you of robbing them of glory. One poet writes a bitter ode titled "The Coward of Olympus," which rhymes Heracles with fleas. It's not your best press. Back in Tiryns, Eurystheus tries once more to regain control. He hands you a scroll marked with a golden seal. This one bears the symbol of Hera. You pose. You open it. Inside is a single sentence. Visit Delphi. Alone. You go. The oracle is waiting. This time, sober, sharp-eyed. She tells you that your labors were not punishment. Not truly. They were preparation for what you ask, to become more than man. She replies, to become memory. You blink. I don't want to be memory. I want to be finished. She smiles. Sadly, no one who touches the gods ever leaves unchanged. You walk out into the sunlight. I'm not sure whether she's blessing you or cursing you. Probably both. The next month is quiet. Too quiet. You help dig a well. Catch a thief stealing figs and let him off with a lecture. Build a temple for Hera. Yes. Really? Because even hatred deserves respect. You place new idols inside. Just an empty space. Just acknowledgement. That night, Hera visits you in a dream. She stands in a field of white poppies. Her face unreadable. You were supposed to die. She says, I tried. You reply. She nods. I know. Then she's gone. You wake up with tears on your cheeks and the taste of poppies in your mouth. The world turns. The stories spread. But now, they come with shadows. People begin to ask, what happened to his wife, his sons? Why does he always travel alone? You never answer, because you're not ready. Not yet, but soon. You don't return to Tyrannus for a long time. Maybe out of pride. Maybe because you're tired of seeing Eurystheus's name on scrolls and hearing his voice filtered through curtains and trembling servants. But mostly because you've started to notice something the farther you get from the throne rooms and the temples, the more real the world becomes again. People out here don't want stories. They want help. They want their roofs repaired, their fields protected, and their fires lit. They call you Heracles. Yes, but they don't say it with awe. They say it like they're asking you to pass the bread. And gods. It's a relief. No titles. No monsters. Just honest sweat and quiet evenings under the stars. You spend weeks in a village rebuilding a bridge that washed out in the spring floods. Your hands blister. Your back cracks like thunder. But no one writes songs about it. And that's the best part. The only applause is the clatter of hooves when a cart makes it across safely again. You sleep on hay and smell like sheep and feel more human than you have in years. But peace doesn't last. You're sitting in the shade of an olive tree when a boy runs up. Ponting. Eyes wide. With a message a woman in Trachis needs help. Not with a monster or a rebellion, but with childbirth. And not just any woman, Deianira. Princess of Caledon. The name snaps your memory awake. You met her once. Years ago. Before the labors began. She was fierce then. And stubborn. Now she's in danger. You go without a second thought. You find her on the road. Surrounded by panicked servants and a collapsed ox cart. A river blocks their path. Wide and wild from recent rain. She's pregnant. She's sweating. And there's no bridge. You scan the banks. Already calculating. That's when a figure steps from the trees. Tall. Fur-covered. With the torso of a man and the legs of a horse. A centaur Nessus. He offers help with a grin too wide to trust. I'll carry her across. He says. Safely. Swiftly. You narrow your eyes. Every instinct says no. But time is short. She's pale. She's gripping her side. You nod. He lifts her into his arms and wades into the current. At first, it's fine. Then she screams. You look up and see Nessus running, not walking. Running up the far bank with Deianira in his arms. She's fighting him. He's laughing. And you don't think. You just act. Your bow is in your hand before you remember reaching for it. One arrow. Dipped in Hydra's blood. Years ago. It flies true. It strikes Nessus in the back. He stumbles. Drops Deianira. And collapses. Hissing. You cross the river and reach her in time. She's shaken. But unhurt. You hold her for a long moment. She doesn't ask about the arrow. She doesn't ask about the blood. But Nessus, dying. gasps something in her ear as she turns to leave. You don't hear it. You're already thinking of how to make a fire. A bed. A safe place. Later. You'll find out what he said. But not now. Now you escort her to safety. Weeks pass. You stay by her side. She gives birth to a boy. You name him Hylas. He's strong. He has her eyes. For a moment, life is soft again. You even marry her, not for politics, not for duty, but because when she speaks, the wind listens, and when she laughs, the weight in your chest lightens. You think, foolishly, that this could last. Then Eurystheus sends another message. You laugh when you read it. Not because it's funny, but because, of course, he has one more task. Not a labor. A demand. He's heard of the sack of Oechalia. A tyrant king there. Eurytus. Insulted you years ago. Denied you his daughter Iole's hand in marriage after a contest. He said you weren't civilized enough. That your strength was brute. Not divine. You let it go then. But word spreads that Eurytus is mocking you again. Calling you a has-been. Claiming you fabricated the labors. Saying he could break you with a sneeze. You don't care. Not at first. Then you hear he's mistreated Iole. Locked her away. Threatened her family. Tightened his grip on his kingdom like a child hoarding broken toys. That's different. You march on Oechalia. No monster. No divina curse. Just a tyrant. And you bring him down with terrifying precision. You shatter his walls. You disable his guards. You leave him alive long enough to apologize once before silencing him forever. You take Iole under your protection. Not as a conquest, but as a rescue. She's quiet. She flinches. When people shout, you say nothing. Just make sure she has a warm bed and no reason to fear. But Deianira hears about her. From servants. From gossip. From the shape of your silences. She doesn't rage. She doesn't accuse. She just grows distant. Folds your cloak a little less carefully. Smiles with a little more effort. And somewhere, deep in her heart, a seed of doubt begins to bloom. That's when she remembers the words of Nessus. Keep this, he had said, handing her a vial of his blood. It's a love charm. If Heracles ever strays, this will bind his heart to you forever. She believed him. Why wouldn't she? He was dying, and desperate truth often comes with gore and trembling breath. So she soaks a tunic in the blood, sends it to you as a gift. You, unsuspecting, receive it with joy. You put it on. At first, there's nothing. Then heat. Then pain. Then the kind of fire no water can touch. The Hydra's venom, still potent after all these years, activates. Your skin bubbles. Your muscles tear. You scream like the mountains themselves have cracked. You try to rip it off. But it clings. It fuses. It eats. You stumble into the woods, clawing at trees. Howling. Animals scatter. Birds drop from the sky. There's no battle here. No enemy. Just a betrayal that didn't know it was won. You lie on the ground, panting, waiting for the end. But it doesn't come. You survive. Barely. You drag yourself to the sea. Deianira, upon learning what happened, takes her own life. Not from guilt, but heartbreak. Iole says nothing, just tends your wounds in silence. You lie on the shore for days. Then, in a strange twist of fate, Apollo appears, He offers you a choice. Burn away the mortal. Become immortal. But to do so, you must die first. Truly die. You agree. You build your own pyre atop Mount Oeta. Wood from sacred trees. Stones marked by prayers. No one lights it. Until your friend, Philoctetes, steps forward with a torch. You nod. And the flames consume you, but not all of you. The gods lift what remains, what endures. The pain, the labor, the legend. They carry it skyward. And Heracles, the man, becomes Heracles, the god. You wake not in flesh, but in memory, and the stars welcome you home. The stars do not blink. They do not whisper. They do not flinch. They simply are eternal, radiant, impossibly far away. And now, you are among them. Or perhaps not you exactly, but what remains of you, the stories, the shape of your strength, the myth wrapped in immortality. Olympus receives you not with open arms, but with arched brows and veiled smirks. You've been inducted. Yes, but not entirely embraced. Not everyone is thrilled that a once mortal demigod, born of Zeus and a mortal woman, now walks among the divine, like he owns the place. The reception feels less like a celebration and more like being reluctantly invited to a family reunion where everyone suspects you might steal the cutlery. Athena nods to you. Artemis watches you like you're a hawk perched just a little too close to her bowstring. Apollo, ever the performer, slaps your shoulder with a grin and says something about finally getting the hero upgrade package. But it's Hera who holds the room with her silence. You meet her eyes across the marble floor. Your new form wrapped in radiance and lion hide. And for the first time in your long, bloody life, she doesn't look angry. She looks tired. You bow not deeply, but enough. She lifts her chin and walks away. Historians still argue whether Hera ever truly forgave you, or whether she simply grew weary of the vengeance spiral. After all, she played a part in every labor, every trial. Some claim your deification was her olive branch. Others believe it was her final joke, immortality, as a punishment for a man who so desperately wanted rest. You try to settle into divine life. You're given a seat, an altar, even a new bride Hebe, goddess of youth. She's kind, quick to laugh, and refreshingly uninterested in your blood-soaked resume. You learn to drink nectar without gagging. You stop flexing when you walk past polished columns. You even stop scowling at Zeus. Most of the time. He, of course, beams like this was all part of the plan. His mighty son finally joining the family business. You let him believe it, but Olympus is not paradise. It's quieter than Earth. Yes, and the ceilings are higher. But the politics are just as messy. Every god has a feud. Every goddess a grudge. You spend one eternity-long afternoon refereeing an argument between Demeter and Dionysus about whose festival should get the equinox. Spoiler: no one wins. You find solace in the stars. Literally. There's a section of the sky now called Heracles. They even gave you your own constellation, though. Frankly, it doesn't look like you. More like a flexing starfish holding a stick. But still, when mortals look up, they see your name, your shape. They whisper your stories by firelight and etch your feats into crumbling stone. You become bedtime comfort and battlefield inspiration. Children grow up knowing how you strangled the Nemean lion, how you captured Cerberus, how you held the sky itself. But none of them know how often you wake in Olympus to phantom pain. Your immortality is real, but your memories remain. You still see Megara's face in candlelight. You still feel the heat of Hydra venom under your skin. You still dream of Deianira standing beside a river, clutching that blood-soaked tunic with hope curdling in her hands. And yet, you do not fade. You roam the divine halls. You practice archery with Apollo. You wrestle bears conjured by Artemis. You hold back storms with Poseidon on a bet. You occasionally babysit mortal heroes summoned to Olympus for some undeserved trial. Most are arrogant. A few are promising. One wets himself when you speak. You stop keeping count, but over time, something strange happens. Your labors, the 12 you once hated, that once clung to you like chains, begin to shift. They become more than punishments. They become principles, symbols. To the mortals below, you are not just a strong man who killed monsters. You are the embodiment of persistence, of redemption. Each labor now stands for something larger than itself. The lion becomes courage, the Hydra, strategy, the stables, ingenuity, the apples, temptation. Even Cerberus becomes a metaphor, facing the worst and returning with dignity. You become an idea, a moral compass etched in myth. You don't ask for this, but you don't reject it either. What surprises you most is how the gods begin to change their tune. Ares, ons dismissive, starts inviting you to sparring matches. He loses every time, but insists it's just for fun. Athena debates philosophy with you under olive trees, asking what you've learned from being a man. You tell her that pain teaches more than pride. She nods and pours you more wine. Even Hera, once your greatest tormentor, begins leaving offerings on your altar. Quite gestuurus. A fig, a polished stone. Once, a thread of lion fur braided in gold. She never speaks to you directly, but she no longer scowls. You suspect she's still watching, waiting for you to slip. You don't give her the satisfaction. And then, one day, a mortal calls your name, not in worship, but in desperation. A young man, his village burned, his sister taken by raiders. He prays not to Zeus, not to Ares, but to you, Heracles, the one who endured, the one who always came back. And for the first time, you feel something stir in your divine chest that isn't grief or guilt or exhaustion. You feel purpose. You descend not as thunder, not with divine fanfare, but quietly, as a stranger with calloused hands and a steady voice. You help the boy. You return his sister. You rebuild the village. Then you leave, with no altar, no feast, no name, but the story spreads anyway. Heracles came. He still walks the earth. They whisper. He still protects those who have nothing else. And suddenly, the stories feel less like chains. They feel like bridges, because now, you aren't just a man who survived 12 labors. You are a god who remembers what it means to bleed. And that, perhaps more than all your strength, is what truly makes you immortal. You return to Olympus, less like a god and more like a traveler passing through an old neighborhood. The halls are still grand. The columns still shimmer. And the ambrosia still tastes like disappointment wrapped in honey. But something's different now. You no longer flinch when the other gods argue. You no longer try to impress them. You've seen too much, lost too much, lived too long, pretending glory was the goal. Now, you walk quietly, and they notice. Hermes offers a seat beside him, not because he wants to brag, but because, for once, he wants to listen. Demeter invites you to a harvest rite, and you show up early, help sweep the floors, and leave before anyone asks for a speech. You're not there to perform anymore. You're there to be present, but the mortal world pulls at you still. You don't belong fully in Olympus. Not really. Not with those who've never been afraid, never begged for forgiveness, never buried loved ones under stones too heavy to lift. You begin returning more frequently, not in dramatic visions or fire-breathing miracles, but in small ways. A whisper in the ear of a shepherd afraid of wolves, a shadow over a battlefield that sends raiders running, a lion-skinned figure that appears in the dreams of a mother who lost her son, telling her he's at peace. They never know it's you. They just feel safer afterward. But not all callings come from prayers. Some are old debts clawing their way out of time. One afternoon, as you rest in the glinting gardens of Olympus, Hebe by your side, and the sun painting lazy lines across the marble, a breeze carries something peculiar, your name, spoken not with reverence but with malice. You rise. Hera is already watching you. She nods. Once. She's heard it too. In the far west, beyond where most maps even bother to exist, something stirs. A memory. A threat you thought buried under centuries of stories. The ghost of Eurystheus. Apparently, dying didn't stop him. His followers, men who worshipped power, order, hierarchy, for its own sake have built shrines to his legacy. They twist your story, say you were a weapon he wielded, that you became divine because of his guidance. They teach that strength is domination, not endurance, that the gods rewarded cruelty disguised as control. And now, they gather, in armor styled like your old lion skin, carrying clubs with hollow pride, chanting your name in the same breath as his. You feel your hands curl into fists. You descend again, not to crush them, not yet. First, you watch. You walk among them as a nameless traveler. You hear their words, their perversions. They speak of the Hydra as a symbol of cowardice, of women's duplicity, of the Amazons as unruly beasts tamed by male strength. They scoff at the idea that you ever cried, or doubted, or begged the gods to take the pain away. One even says, Heracles was a kingmaker, not a servant. You leave before your hands betray your patience. You travel to the ruins of Nemea, where the grass still bears the memory of your first labor. You sit there and remember what it felt like to face that lion. Alone, with nothing but bruised pride and a half-broken club. You remember how heavy it was, how unfair, how terrifying. You remember killing it not for glory, but because someone had to. Then you remember what the oracle said. Your labors were preparation for this. So you find the loudest of Eurystheus's shrines. The biggest, the most grotesque. It's built of black stone and arrogance, nestled into a cliff like a wart. The priests inside wear masks shaped like your face. Mockeries. Their torches burn with stolen olive oil. Their scrolls preach punishment without mercy. You walk in. Unannounced, the room falls silent. They know it's you. The lion pelt isn't just fashion anymore. It's a warning. One man, young, foolish, steps forward. You honor us with your presence. Lord Heracles, he says, bowing, we've restored your legacy. You stare at him. Then at the twisted murals lining the walls, images of you crushing people who disagreed. Of you laughing while women wept. Of you standing beside Eurystheus like a loyal pet. This, you say, voice low, is not my story. He blinks, but it's what inspires them. No, you say, it's what poisons them. Then, calmly, you take your club and you destroy it. You smash every false idol, every blackened scroll, every mask made in your likeness. You burn the tapestries, rip down the banners, grind the altars to powder. The men scatter. Some fall to their knees. One tries to draw a blade, you disarm him without breaking a sweat. You think strength is cruelty. You say, stepping over the rubble. But real strength is surviving what tries to break you and choosing not to pass that hurt forward. They don't argue. They just run. When you leave, the sun is rising. You don't rebuild the shrine. You plant a fig tree. You return to Olympus. Quieter than before, Hebe meets you by the gates. She doesn't ask where you went. She just takes your hand and leads you back inside. That night, the stars shine a little clearer. A new prayer reaches your ears. This time, it's from a girl on an island far away. Her village is sick. The elders blame a curse. She just wants clean water. You go. Of course, she doesn't know who you are. You show her how to dig a well. You teach her how to use heated stones to purify what's gathered. You sit with her until her mother recovers. She gives you a carved pebble as thanks. You keep it. More prayers, Coma. Not for monsters to be slain, but for guidance, for protection, for courage. And you begin to understand what you've become. Not a hero, not even a god, but a memory made flesh. A symbol that listens. You don't stop the storms, but you teach people how to build stronger roofs. You don't end wars, but you shelter the wounded and bury the dead with dignity. You don't claim victories anymore. You leave before the feasts begin. Sometimes, you just stand beside someone who's lost everything and remind them that they're still breathing, that they still can. You wonder what your sons would think of you now. Then you look up at the sky and see that old, awkward constellation shaped like a starfish in flecks. And you chuckle. Could have at least given me knees. You mutter, but deep down, you don't mind. Because somewhere, a child looks up and points. That one, they say, that's Heracles. He helps people. And in that moment, you are enough. It begins with a funeral. Not yours. For once. Though you wouldn't be surprised if someone carved your name into the tombstone by mistake. No. This one is for a prince young. Reckless. Beloved by his city. The kind of boy who tried to fight a war with poetry and ended up with an arrow in his side. You attend not because you knew him, but because the people asked, not with words, but with candles, offerings, quiet prayers that smelled more like grief than incense. You walk through the city without announcing yourself. Your lion pelt, drawing curious glances, but no reverence. That's the difference now. They no longer worship the image of Heracles. They recognize the man, bruised, burned, still, standing. The boy's mother meets you at the gate of the temple. She's small, spine like iron, voice like wind over broken marble. She doesn't bow. She just hands you a necklace, his, and says, "Take him where the gods can still hear." You do. You carry it up the mountain. Alone. Speaking his name with every step, you don't ask the gods to save him. Just to remember. The way people remembered you when you couldn't remember yourself. You bury the necklace beneath a fig tree. It's always fig trees with you lately. They're stubborn. They grow back after fire. You return to Olympus, quieter than before. The others are holding court. Some argument over mortals sacrificing goats to the wrong deity. You tune it out. Hera catches your eye. There's no smirk this time. No distance. Just one slow nod. Maybe it means nothing. Or maybe, after all these years, she sees you as something more than Zeus's accident. Later, you find Apollo tuning a lyre beneath a colonnade. You ask if he remembers the first time you visited Delphi. He grins. You smelled like swamp and regret. You sit beside him. You told the oracle to send me to my cousin. You say, told her to give me labors. He shrugs. You needed something to shape you. You could have sent therapy. He laughs. You think that would have worked. You think about it. Probably not. The gods don't sleep, but sometimes they rest. In those quiet hours between immortal duties, you wander the edges of Olympus, past the gardens, past the shimmering pools, up into the marble cliffs where no altars have ever been built. That's where you find the old ones, the memories of Titans still echoing in stone. The weight of stories too old to name. You sit among them and listen. One night, you hear something different. Not a prayer, not a plea, but a song, sung in a cracked voice, by a woman kneeling in a ruined temple, far from any road. She sings of grief, of loss, of a strength that carried her through the flood. She sings your name not as a god, but as a lesson. Her fingers trace the cracks in the altar. Her tears are not for show. You go to her. You don't descend in light. You just walk up the path and sit beside her. She doesn't flinch. She just keeps singing. You stay until morning. When she wakes, you hand her a flask of water. She smiles. I thought I was alone. She says, you shake your head. Never. The years pass differently now. You exist where you're needed. Sometimes in flesh. Sometimes in memory. The line between the two grows thin. You help a boy lift a stone too heavy for his shoulders. You help a city rebuild after a storm. You help a man stand beside his son's grave and remember how to breathe. No one builds you temples for this, but they carve your story into fences, into songs, into quiet lessons passed from father to daughter, mother to son. They say, be strong, like Heracles. And sometimes, when they say strong, they mean to able to carry pain without spilling it onto others. That's enough for you, but not everyone agrees. Far in the east, a new cult rises. They call themselves Sons of the 12. They claim to follow your example, but it's all rot. They preach conquest. They twist your labors into commandments. Crush the lion. Purge the Hydra. Burn the weak. You hear rumors of villages raised in your name, of men wearing lion hides and dragging children from their homes. You go. Of course you do. You find them mid-ritual. Fire blazing. Statues of you flanking their altar like silent conspirators. A man in golden armor shouts your name, declares himself your heir. Heracles was strength incarnate. He yells. He punished weakness. So shall we. You step into the firelight, They freeze. One drops his torch. You walk straight to the altar, rip down the statue, and throw it into the flames. That wasn't strength. You say, that was survival. The golden one sputters. But you killed monsters. You step closer. Yes. And I buried the people I couldn't save. Did you? They don't answer. You look at the villagers behind them, scared, bruised, silent. You kneel, break their chains, help them stand. Then, you turn to the cultists. Leave. You say, and, if you tell my story, tell it true. They scatter, like rats exposed to daylight. The villagers offer you bread, shelter, songs. You decline them all, but one, a child's hug. You stay long enough to help mend roofs, then leave before dawn. You've learned not to linger. They make you into statues if you do. Back in Olympus, Dionysus throws a feast. You attend. Reluctantly, he insists on telling a story about how you once punched a centaur so hard it turned into wine. You don't correct him. Not worth the breath. But you smile. The wine's good. You leave early. Again. Walk alone under the star-strewn sky. You look up at your constellation. Still awkward. Still flexing. But it's yours. You wonder if Megara would recognize you now. If Deianira would forgive you. If your sons would understand why you couldn't save them. You hope they know how many you've saved, since you sit on a cliff and whisper their names to the wind. No one hears, except maybe Hera. You feel her nearby sometimes. In the rustle of leaves, in the tightening of your chest when the wind carries the scent of fig trees and fire. You don't hate her anymore. You don't quite forgive her either. But you understand her. She saw a threat. She acted. You survived. That's the truth beneath the myth. You lean back. Close your eyes. You are not a hero. You are not a god. You are Heracles. Still walking. Still learning. Still listening. You start keeping a list. Not of monsters. Not of kings. Not even of your labors. Those have long since carved themselves into the bones of the world. No. This list is quieter. Smaller. It lives in the back of your mind. And you update it in silence. A girl in Argos who learned to hold a sword but chose to teach instead. A mason in Lesbos who rebuilt his house after a flood and then helped 3 neighbors do the same. A boy in Delphi who sang to his sister so she wouldn't be afraid of thunder. You don't write them down. You just remember. These are the people worth watching over. These are the ones who carry the world now. Quietly. Without the need for stories or shrines, because you've seen enough stories to know how easily they lie. One day, you return to Thebes. The city has changed. New temples, new markets, new paint over old stones. The house you once lived in with Megara is gone, replaced by a sculptor's studio. You stand in the doorway, watching him chip away at a block of marble, coaxing a face from the stone like a memory. He doesn't look up. You leave before he sees you. That night, you sit on a hill outside the city and look down at the torch-lit rooftops. The river still winds the same way. The stars still lean in at the same angle. You whisper to Megara. Tell her you're sorry. Tell her you remember everything. Tell her you've tried to live in a way she wouldn't regret. The wind answers with fig blossoms and silence. Back in Olympus, Hermes catches you, staring off into nothing. You keep coming and going, he says, tossing a pebble in his hand. You ever pick a side? You shrug. I don't think there are sides. Just people trying not to drown. He nods. Well, you're still loud enough to scare titans. That's not strength. You mutter. That's just echo. He tosses the pebble. It skips across a pool and vanishes. You think about what the world thinks you are. They think you loved the labors. They think you begged for immortality. They think you were never afraid. You once tried correcting them. Now, you've learned that stories are like rivers. They don't care what you intended. They flow where they're pulled. And they carry whatever floats. So instead, you offer new stories. In a mountain village, you help a blind poet find his rhythm again. You show him how to hold the reed gently, how to hear the shape of a stanza before he speaks it. He teaches children to recite with their hands on their hearts. He never learns your name, just calls you the traveler with cracked knuckles and a soft voice. That's fine. In a port city, you carry a sick woman 5 miles uphill, so she can die looking at the sea. She doesn't thank you. She just weeps. You stay until she stops. Then bury her with wildflowers. In a temple to Ares, you find young men beating their chests and preaching the glory of war. You don't argue. You just walk into the ring, take the biggest one, and pin him with a single hand. Then you help him up, to pat his shoulder, and say, real strength is walking away from a fight you know you can win. He doesn't believe you. Not yet, but his hand trembles a little when he picks up his spear again. Back in the sky, your constellation flickers. You visit it sometimes, not in body, but in thought. You walk along those stars like stepping stones, looking down at the mortal world through glittering silence. You see lovers quarrel, then laugh. You see farmers bless their cows with prayers half-remembered from old tales. You see children build forts and call them Heraclean. One paints a lion with 6 legs. You approve. Then comes a whisper. Not from Earth, from Olympus, Zeus. He calls you to his hall. You arrive. He sits on his throne of thunder and marble. Higawazever. Beard perfectly oiled. Eyes like storm clouds, trying to behave. You've been busy, he says. You nod. Helping mortals. Avoiding councils. Skipping sacrifices. You shrug. He taps his fingers against the throne. You were meant to rule. No. You say, I was meant to serve. He frowns. To serve what? You smile. Slowly. Something better than myself. He doesn't answer, but he doesn't stop you. Either. Later, Hera finds you in the garden. She doesn't say your name, just walks beside you, slow and silent, until the moon rises over the treetops. After a long while, she says, do you ever regret it? You don't ask which part. You just reply, only when I forget why I did it. She hums, you should forget more often. I try. You look up. The stars have shifted again. Your arm is bent at a new angle. One of the old priests must have redrawn your position in the night sky. The elbow looks ridiculous now. But you chuckle. You think of your son? Hylas. Now, grown. Now, learning to be more than your shadow. He writes letters to you. Sometimes, leaves them at your altar. He doesn't know you read them. You never answer directly. But once, when he prayed for clarity, you sent him a fox. It bit his toe and stole his map. It got lost, but he found something better than a road. He found his own path. You never wanted to be a legend. But now, you try to be a useful one. And some nights, when the wind is quiet, and the fig trees bloom, and no one needs saving for a while, you just lie on the grass and let the world keep spinning. Not as a god, not as a hero, just as a man who once wrestled a lion and never stopped trying to be better than the day before, and maybe, just maybe, that's the hardest labor of all. It's a cold morning on Olympus, when you first notice the apple tree. It wasn't there yesterday of that, you're certain. Trees don't just appear. Not even here. But this one stands near the edge of the garden. Its bark pale as moonstone. Its fruit golden. Not glowing. Not enchanted. Just golden. Familiar. You tilt your head. You've seen apples like this before. In a garden guarded by nymphs and a dragon who never slept. You stole those once. A labor. As proof. Now, one stands here, ripened in a place that shouldn't change. You ask Athena about it over a game of stones. She pretends not to know. Her throw misses the target. You both pretend that doesn't mean anything. Later, you ask Hebe. She shrugs. Maybe someone up there thought you needed reminding. You nod, even though you don't. But you visit the tree every day. You don't touch the apples. Just sit near the roots and listen. You hear the murmurs of old winds, of a time when you held the sky while Atlas wandered free. You think of that moment, often how heavy the heavens felt. How close you came to staying there forever. Not out of sacrifice, but out of exhaustion. Some scholars say you tricked Atlas because you feared the weight. Others say you were clever, patient, saw the trap before it snapped shut. The truth, you were both. You were tired, but not done. You still aren't, because even now, prayers drift up like seeds on wind. Some urgent, some quiet, some so soft they sound like apologies. You answer the ones no one else hears. A man whose crops have failed 5 years in a row. A mother whose son can't stop crying in the night. A woman who wants to lift something heavier than herself and doesn't know how to begin. You go. You listen. Sometimes you speak. Sometimes you don't. Once, a boy asks if you're really Heracles. You ask him what he thinks. He frowns and says, "You don't look like the statues." You laugh. They never get the nose right. He laughs, too. He's missing 2 teeth. You show him how to swing a stick properly, and how to use it only when absolutely necessary. You leave him with a pouch of olives and the beginnings of a story he can one day tell his children. You climb a mountain next. Not for war, not for glory, just because no one's done it yet. At the summit, you leave a small stone carved with a lion's paw. Not your name, just the paw. You think about how often symbols say more than speeches. When you descend, you find a woman waiting. She wears robes of dark green, hair pinned with bones, eyes sharp as obsidian. Hecate, she gestures for you to follow. You do. She leads you not into darkness, but into dusk. A liminal place. Half dream, half history. Here, you see them. The ones who speak your name in bitterness. The monsters. Not just beasts, but the ones you fought. The ones who died with your name on their lips. The Nemean lion. The Hydra. Geryon. Diomedes. Even Nessus. They don't attack. They just watch. Hecate raises an eyebrow. Say it. You hesitate. Then I remember you. She nods. That's all. No. You step forward. I feared you. I hated you. I didn't understand you. But I remember you. The lion inclines its massive head. The Hydra flickers in and out of shape, shifting like memory itself. Gerion's three faces remain unreadable. You don't ask forgiveness. You offer recognition, and in this strange twilight, that's enough. When you return to Olympus, you find an offering at the base of the apple tree. Not incense. Not gold. Just a small carving of a boar, childlike in execution. Someone remembered your fourth labor. You smile. You hang it from a branch. The gods don't ask where you've been. They rarely do anymore. Zeus nods when you pass. Hera still watches you. But now, there's something different in her gaze. Not softness. Not approval. Something more dangerous. Respect. One evening, while you're helping Dionysus brew a new wine that smells suspiciously like regret and elderberries, he asks, "What was the worst part?" You don't answer right away. Then, quietly, not knowing if I was still human when it ended, he pours you a cup. You don't drink it. You just hold it. In your sleep, you dream of the river Styx, of standing at its edge and hearing your own name echo back. Distorted. You see your reflection in the black water, not divine. Not monstrous. Just a man. Bruised. Still standing. You wake with your fists clenched. Hebe touches your shoulder. You relax. Later, you wander to the edge of Olympus, where no one visits. You sit. You write. Not on scrolls. On stone. On tree bark. In sand, you write what they never told. How many times you cried. How many times you failed. How many times you almost didn't get back up. You don't sign it. But when mortals stumble across your words, they feel them, and they begin to understand. That strength was never the point. It was the cost. The weight, the choice to keep going when there were easier ways to vanish. You're still here, still remembering, still choosing. The wind on Olympus carries stories. Not just the ones spoken aloud by priests in smoke-choked temples, or those scribbled by poets chasing royal commissions. No. These stories drift up in bits and pieces, the sigh of a farmer after burying a sick ox, the half-formed lullaby a mother hums in a storm, the breathless confession of a boy who kissed another boy behind the olive grove. You hear all of it, and you no longer try to sort the sacred from the ordinary. You know better now. Sometimes the most divine thing in the world is a kindness that leaves no trace. But today, the wind carries something heavier. A rumor. A truth wrapped in denial. Someone is forging a new version of your labors. At first, it sounds like flattery. Mortals have always retold your stories, twisted them into entertainments, added dramatic flair, three-headed goats, singing arrows, a sidekick named Pomelos. But this is different. This version doesn't just embellish, it rewrites. In it, you don't hesitate before killing. You don't grieve. You don't bleed. You become a clean machine of divine fury, stomping out enemy, toppling kingdoms, smiling in every victory. It's efficient, marketable, false, and it's spreading. You hear children reciting it in town squares. Soldiers etch quotes from it into their swords. Priests invoke it to justify cruelty, saying, "Even Heracles showed no mercy." You feel bile rise in your throat. You didn't endure so much just to become a tool in someone else's hands. So you descend again, not with thunder, not with trumpets, just a man with tired eyes and a walking stick worn smooth by centuries. You find the source in a stone amphitheater carved into a cliffside. A playwright named Defiance, young and smug, staging nightly retellings of your 12 labors, reimagined as acts of conquest. In one, you burn the Stymphalian marshes to the ground. In another, you slay Hippolyta without speaking. The crowd applauds. Coins rain down. Defiance bows. You watch from the back. Unnoticed. When the crowd disperses, you step forward. He squints at you, laughs. You've got the look. He says, "We're holding auditions for Act 2 next week." You say nothing. He pauses. "You all right?" Old man, you reach into your cloak and pull out a small carving, the boar figure a child once gave you, and place it on the stage. "I lived those stories." You say, voice low, unhurried, "You're turning them into war songs." He frowns. "People need heroes." "No." You correct. "People need truth." Then, you leave. You don't wait for the next performance. You already know what he'll do. He'll rewrite again. Or he won't. Either way, the world will keep telling your story the way it wants. So you find other ways to speak. You sit in marketplaces and tell the story of the Augean stables not as a triumph, but as an act of desperation, of trickery, of frustration. When rivers don't flow the way you hope, you describe the stink, the futility, the way even success felt hollow when no one believed it counted. People laugh. Some listen. A few cry. You find a fisherman in Pylos who remembers your tale of the Hydra, but not the part where your nephew helped you. You teach him that part. He adds it to his nightly songs. Soon, the name Aiolos returns to the mouths of storytellers. Quietly, but it spreads. In another town, a girl claims she saw you in her dreams. You ask what you were doing. "Fixing a cartwheel," she says, "and feeding a dog." You nod. Sounds about right. The gods begin to notice. Ares scowls. You're weakening your own legend. "No." You reply, "I'm strengthening the truth." Athena smiles. "Just a little." Zeus raises an eyebrow, but doesn't interfere. Even Hera, in a moment of uncharacteristic candor, says, "You're becoming harder to hate." You take it as a compliment. One morning, you wake with an ache in your ribs that wasn't there yesterday. Not pain. Exactly. Just pressure. Like something inside you wants out. You walk to the edge of Olympus and breathe deep. You hear names you thought you forgot. Children you saved. Mothers you lost. Monsters you pitied. You wonder, not for the first time, whether gods are meant to feel this much, whether immortality is supposed to weigh so heavily. You remember what it was like to be mortal. You never want to forget. So you do something unprecedented. You build a shrine. Not to yourself, to everyone you lost. A grove of olive trees. One for each life that intersected yours. Megara. Deianira. Pholas. The centaurs you fought. Even Nessus. Yes. Even him. You carve new names. Just stones. Each one shaped with your own hands. You tend the grove in silence. Hebe helps you water the roots. Hermes visits and leaves notes folded into the branches. Apollo comes once. Plays one song. and leaves before you can speak. When mortals find it, they don't understand. Some call it a hero's garden. Some think it's an unfinished temple. One child leaves a stick figure drawing of a man with a lion's head and a big, clumsy smile. You hang it from the tallest branch. The tree sways, approving. You start teaching again. Not officially, not from a scroll, but through presence. You sit with blacksmiths and talk about leverage. You walk with children and show them how to climb without fear. You tell the truth to those who ask. And when they ask if the labor's hurt, you always say yes, and they believe you, because they can see it in your eyes. You begin to see your name used less and less in temples, more and more in kitchens, in fields, in stories whispered not with reverence, but with recognition. Heracles didn't give up. Heracles made mistakes. Heracles came back. You're not a god anymore. Not really. You're a mirror. You reflect what people need. The reminder that survival can be holy. That grief is not failure. That strength comes in standing up after you thought you couldn't. You sit beneath the apple tree one last time. The fruits have begun to fall. One by one. Golden and warm to the touch. You pick one up. Weigh it in your palm. You do not bite it. You place it at the base of the trunk and whisper, "Let someone else eat." You rise. You walk, not forward, just onward. You pass into Thessaly, under a sky, the color of old bronze, where the sun hangs low and sullen. Its heat, less like warmth and more like a watchful eye. The olive trees here grow close together, nodding their limbs as if whispering secrets too ancient for mortals to know. You walk a narrow path, flanked by wild rosemary and broken cairns. Every so often, you see a child's ribbon tied to a branch, or a cracked pot filled with salt. Offerings, maybe. Warnings. More likely, you don't touch them. You know better by now. The land remembers. They say this region was once ruled by the Lapith's famed warriors, kin of Ixion, who battled centaurs at weddings and spilled blood into the soil until it bloomed a darker red. You met one of them once. Long ago. Canis. They were called then. Stronger than anyone expected. Carried their rage like a second sword. The world wasn't kind to them. And neither were the gods. You think of them as you walk, and wonder what name they whisper to the wind now. You're here because someone asked. Not a king, not a priest, a girl. She sent her prayer folded into a song, carried by a traveling bard who passed it along like a riddle. Her name was Lysandra. She wrote only, "My village is forgetting. Please help us remember." You felt it as soon as you crossed the border. The stories here have grown pale, faded. People still speak your name, but with the same flat tone they use for droughts and taxes. Heracles. The tax of memory. Heracles. The obligation. Heracles. The name carved into too many walls. You find the village tucked into the elbow of two hills. Its homes built from stone, bleached soft by decades of sun. No guards greet you. No offerings wait on the threshold. Just a boy staring at the sky. Squinting. He doesn't flinch when you approach. "You're late," he says. You grin. "I get that a lot." He leads you to a square where elders sit beneath an awning, chewing fig leaves and whispering to one another like mice in a granary. They glance up. One recognizes you. His face collapses into something like shame. "We stopped telling the stories," he says. Unprompted. They frightened the children. You nod. They should. A silence settles like dust. But they gave us courage, says another. Younger. One eye milky. The other sharp. When the river dried up, when the wolves came down in spring, they made us afraid of ourselves, says the first. You stay the night. Eat barley bread. Listen to the crickets, argue with the wind. In the morning, you walk the fields with Lysandra. She's taller than you imagined. 17. Smells like firewood and new parchment. She tells you she's been writing her own version of the labors. Shorter, she says. Funnier. Fewer dead people. You laugh. That's not difficult. She hands you a scroll. Inside is a drawing of you holding up a lemon instead of the sky. The caption reads, Heracles squeezes the cosmos. You keep it at dusk. You gather the villagers. You don't give a speech. You build a fire. And you tell the truth. You tell them about the lion's cave and how the rocks scratched your knees as you crawled into the dark. You tell them how the Hydra smelled like rot and wet wool, and how your hands shook as you burned each neck closed. You tell them how you wept after Hippolyta died, how her girdle wasn't worth the silence that followed. You tell them how you begged the earth to open when you realized Deianira had believed a lie. You tell them how you lived, not how you won, just how you endured. They listen. The silence that follows is not empty. It's full, like a breath you didn't realize you were holding. When you leave, they don't ask for blessings. They just hand you a cloak. They made simple wool, dyed with walnut and pomegranate. It smells like wind. You wear it as you walk, farther north. Another rumor reaches you. A philosopher in Thrace is claiming the labors never happened, that Heracles was invented to explain weather patterns and seasonal crops, that monsters were metaphors, that nothing bleeds, only symbols do. You find his school carved into a cliffside, overlooking a river that runs stubborn even in drought. His students greet you with quiet awe. You ask to speak. He laughs. Will you punch me if I say you're a myth? You shrug. Depends on your tone. A invites you to dine, over lentils and flatbread. He explains his position. Heroes reflect society's fears. He says, your stories are tools. You nod. And hammers can build or break. He squints. So which are you? You chew. Swallow. Depends who's holding me. You leave before dawn. No need to make a scene. The world will decide on its own whether you were real. Your feet carry you to a meadow where wild hares leap through time and old ruins sleep beneath ivy. You lay down. Watch the clouds. Think about how many miles you've walked. How many faces you've forgotten. How many monsters wore human skins. And how many humans were mistaken for monsters. You wonder if your name will outlive the truth of you. You're interrupted by the sound of a lyre. You rise. A girl, maybe 10, sits by a stream. She sings off-key. The song is about you, but not the usual version. In this one, you get lost while chasing the boar and have to ask for directions. The Hydra steals your sandals. You clean the Augean stables and then slip in the mud. The crowd at the amphitheater would have mocked it. You laugh until your ribs ache. She stops playing. Are you him? Sometimes. She nods. You're funnier in the song. I usually am. She hands you a plum. You eat it in one bite. It tastes like rain after a long, cruel summer. You tell her the real story of the bull in Crete. She laughs so hard, she falls backward. Later, she tells everyone she met you. No one believes her. She doesn't care. Back on Olympus, Hebe greets you with a smirk. You're tracking plum juice through the atrium. You kiss her forehead. Worth it. She doesn't ask for details. You love her for that. You pass by the apple tree. One more fruit has dropped. You do not pick it up. Instead, you plant a seed beside it. Just one. Just in case someone else needs it later. It's winter now, at least in the mortal world, and you feel it in your bones, even though you no longer truly age. Olympus stays temperate, crisp and gold all year. But you've always preferred the earthbound seasons, muddy boots, cracked hands, breath hanging in the cold like a spirit. You descend quietly into a coastal village that barely appears on maps. The people here know snow better than sunlight. They string dried fish from doorframes. They name the wind like it's a pet they have to live with. You don't announce yourself. You just start helping. You chop wood. You lift a stuck cart from the mud. You patch a leaking roof with bark and grit. The villagers don't ask questions. They call you grandfather, even though you're clearly neither, and you accept it without protest. Names are slippery anyway. This place doesn't need a god. It needs someone who doesn't mind splinters. At night, you sit by the hearth with a family of 7 and listen to their youngest try to explain what the stars mean. He gets most of them wrong. He says your constellation is a man who carries his own regrets on his back. You don't correct him. It's not wrong. One evening, after the stew is gone and the fire has shrunk to embers, the village elder pulls you aside. She's wrapped in 3 layers of wool, hair like dried moss, voice like pages turning. We had a shrine, she says. Once. To you. It's gone now. You ask why? She shrugs. The sea took it. You ask if they miss it. She looks at the children, at the way they sleep in piles like puppies, and says, not really. We remembered anyway. You walk to the shoreline in the morning. The sea is gray, restless, spitting foam like an old enemy. You wade into the surf until it presses against your ribs. You whisper something you hadn't planned. Thank you. The waves don't answer. But they don't knock you down either. You stay through the thaw. When the snow turns to slush and the air begins to smell like thawed roots and damp wool, you leave. They wave. One child runs after you to give you a button carved with a lion's face. You tie it to your belt. You begin heading inland. You pass through a city that claims to be building a library of heroes. Marble halls, bronze busts, scrolls stacked to the ceiling. They've built a whole wing for you. You walk through it slowly. The bust is too handsome. The scrolls are too neat. There's a tapestry showing you taming the Cyrenian hind by whispering in its ear, "That's a lie." You chased that thing for a year and tripped over every rock in Thessaly doing it. You find a scholar seated beneath the largest window, translating your labors into verse. You sit beside him. He doesn't look up. Did you know, he says, that Heracles never lost a single fight? You lean back. Did you know he once lost a bet to a donkey merchant and had to sweep stables for a week? He laughs. That's not in the scrolls. It wouldn't be. He finally turns. Eyes go wide, then soften. You're not what I imagined. No one ever is. He asks you to stay. Help revise the scrolls. We want the truth, he says. You ask him if he really means that. Truth is messy. It bleeds. It trips. It contradicts itself in the same sentence. He thinks for a while, then says yes. You stay 3 days, not to rewrite the scrolls, to teach him how to see around the corners of stories, to teach him how to ask better questions. Before you leave, he gives you a blank scroll and says, "Write your own." You don't. Not yet. You move eastward, where old temples collapse under ivy and the bones of forgotten gods rattle beneath the earth. Here, no one remembers your name. Not as Heracles. Not as anything. You walk unnoticed among shepherds and weavers. A man hands you bread without asking your story. A girl throws pebbles at your feet and laughs when you pretend to be startled. It's peaceful until it isn't. One morning, a serpent wakes in the hills, a real one. Not metaphor, not dream, 30 feet long. Eyes like fire opals. Voice like a chorus of dry leaves. It slithers into the village at dawn and demands offerings. When refused, it sets a field ablaze with one breath. The villagers look to the sky, then to the shrine, then to each other, and then to you. You sigh. Take off your cloak. I really thought I was done with these. The serpent greets you by name. Heracles, god of inconvenience. Nice to see someone remembers. The fight is short, brutal, ugly. You break a tree in half and use it as a lever. When the dust settles, the serpent is gone alive, but banished. You didn't kill it. You've learned better. The villagers stare. Then a boy claps. Then everyone claps. You wave them off and ask if they have any plums. They do. Later, they try to build a new shrine. You gently knock it over. Just plant a tree. You say. They do. A cherry tree. You leave before the first bloom. Back in Olympus, the gods gossip. Heracles wrestled a storm. Says one. He taught a goat to read. Says another. He's rewriting his legend. Says a third. You let them talk. Let them imagine whatever version of you they need. The truth is out there. Anyway, in fig trees and apple groves, in carved buttons and muddy boots, in bedtime, songs sung just slightly off-key. In stories where the hero cries and keeps going, you sit beside the apple tree. The last fruit falls. You do not catch it. You just watch, and wait, and listen. The sun is sinking low over a dry plain outside Mycenae, casting long amber shadows that slip between cracked stones and bramble. You walk alone. Again. Boots worn thin. The lion's pelt slung across your shoulders faded to the color of dust. No chariots. No heralds. No clanging fanfare. Just your own feet and the occasional chirp of an unimpressed cicada. You've come here because a king requested it. A descendant of Perseus who still thinks the gods care about bloodlines and polished speeches. He sent a silver-chained courier to Olympus with a scroll that said, "Our city forgets what it means to honor strength." You weren't planning to answer, but Hebe read it aloud at breakfast and gave you a look that said, "Go remind them." So now you're here, standing at the gates of a city that once bathed in hero worship and now reeks of politics and coin. They barely open the doors for you. A soldier with half a beard eyes your calloused hands and says, "We were expecting someone taller." You mutter, "We were expecting someone keter," and walk past him into the city. Mycenae hasn't changed much in spirit. The stones are newer. The face is different. But the air still smells of ambition. of secrets hiding beneath polished marble. The king receives you in a hall, lined with mirrors, none of which quite manage to show your true face. He greets you with theatrics and flattery, insists on calling you champion of Olympus, like a child trying out a title he doesn't understand. He gestures to his court nobles, scholars, actors all arranged like props in a badly written play. You scan the room for anyone who looks like they've held a shovel or mended a wall. You find 2, maybe 3. The king explains that he wants to host a festival, reenacting your labors. He wants to inspire unity, pride, tourism. You ask how many starving families live outside his walls. He changes the subject. They dress you in a costume leather too soft, dyed too bright. A stage is built in the market square. A boy with his hair in gold rings plays the Nemean lion. His growl is adorable. The audience laughs. You step onto the platform. Take one look at the scene and realize this isn't about you. It's about them, their fear, their need to rewrite your story into something tidy and safe. You raise a hand to silence the crowd. Then say, "There's a version of this tale where I lose," gasps, murmurs. You continue. "There's a version where the lion crushes my ribs before I ever touch it. A version where the Hydra poisons the water, where I never come home." Someone shouts, "But you did." You nod. "Yes, but not because I was strong. Because I was lucky. Because someone helped. Because I survived things I didn't deserve to survive." The silence that follows is thick, uncomfortable, honest. Then a girl in the crowd stands up. She's maybe 12. Says, "Tell us that version." You do. That night, the actors disappear. The stage is taken down. You sleep in a barn outside the walls, where the air smells like straw and goats. A farmer brings you bread, without asking who you are. In the morning, you help him mend a fence. He doesn't talk. Neither do you. You move east after that, walking through hills so green they seem to hum. In a village tucked among vineyards, a woman invites you to a feast. She's the high priestess of a local goddess, unnamed, uncarved, known only by the rustle of olive leaves. You accept. They seat you on a stone bench beside a boy with nervous hands and an old man who laughs like thunder. You eat stew from shared bowls. Drink wine, so strong it turns memory into fog. And listen to stories you've never heard before. In one, you're a trickster who swaps the horns of a sacred bull for pastries. In another, you're a traveler who teaches a town to bake bricks that don't crumble in rain. You say nothing to correct them, not because they're right, but because they're useful. Stories are like locks. They don't always need the exact key, just one that turns. After the feast, the priestess walks with you beneath the stars. She tells you she's dreamed of fire lately. Not destruction, but purification. The kind that leaves you clean but aching. You nod. You know that kind. She asks if you still feel the weight of the sky on your shoulders. You smile. Not always. Some days it shifts. Some days I carry it better. She places a clay token in your palm. It's shaped like a wave, rough around the edges. Give this to the next person who looks lost. She says. You tuck it into your pouch beside the lion button and the scroll of lemon jokes. You leave before dawn. As always, in a forest near the old border of Arcadia, you meet a hunter who doesn't speak. He offers you dried meat and a glance that says he recognizes you. The two of you track a wounded stag through thickets and streams, never speaking, communicating only through gestures and breath. When you finally corner the animal, you see its leg is broken, but healing. The hunter lowers his bow. You nod. He disappears into the trees. You stay behind. Watch the stag limp back into the underbrush. You whisper, "Stay hidden," even though you know it can't understand. Or maybe it can? You're never quite sure. As you move on, you hear tales of a boy on the islands who claims to be your reincarnation. He lifts stones, wrestles bulls, shouts your name before leaping into rivers. Some say he's a liar. Others say he's a prophet. You don't go to him. Not yet. You want to see what kind of stories he writes before you add yours to his. Instead, you visit the coast and sit beside an old woman who mends nets and talks to birds. She tells you that the sea has moods. You agree. She gives you a feather and says it once belonged to a gull who carried souls across the water. You place it beside the wave token. Your pouch is getting heavy. You think about Atlas again. Not the Titan, but the idea, the burden, the promise. You once thought holding the heavens meant being the strongest. Now, you wonder if it simply means choosing not to let go. Even when your arms shake, back on Olympus, the gods hold a banquet. Dionysus decorates the hall with vines and floating candles. Apollo sings something so beautiful, it makes Ares forget his wine. Hermes cheats at dice. You sit beside Hebe, your hand on hers. And for a moment, you don't think of monsters or myths or labors. You just exist. Afterward, you walk to the edge of the garden and find one of the apples from your tree resting on a marble bench. No, not just the fruit. You bite into it. It tastes like memory, like sorrow, softened with time, like the first breath after a long silence. You don't finish it. You leave the rest on the bench and walk away. Not because you're done with it, but because you know someone else will need it soon. You head south, past dry riverbeds and fields of barley stubble, through ruins that once held names carved into stone, but now host only moss and goat tracks. The road curves between old kingdoms and older bones, and your feet know the way even when your mind drifts. You walk past temples to gods no one worships anymore, their columns broken like teeth, offerings long since stolen or crumbled into dust. You pause at each one not to pray, but to remember. The gods haven't changed. Not really, but their masks have. Their names shift with empire and tongue, but their hunger remains the same. Sometimes, you wonder what they'd be without mortals to believe in them. Probably bored. Probably dangerous. You smile. You've seen them at their worst and best, which, inconveniently, are often the same thing. And Hera, she remains a riddle you no longer try to solve. Her eyes are colder now. Not cruel, but calculating. You haven't spoken to her in a season, but she appears sometimes at the edge of your vision, watching, measuring, maybe regretting. Historians still argue whether she tormented you out of jealousy for Zeus's infidelity or because of a deeper divine rivalry, an ancient oath made long before your birth. The truth is murkier. You were born of spite and necessity, a demigod dropped into a tangled web of grudges, a symbol of something too large to define. She hated the idea of you before she even met you. But now, you don't know. You don't care to ask. There's peace in silence sometimes. You come to a town where the people wear iron charms to ward off monsters. They call you sir, and offer wine too strong for daylight. You decline. There's a girl here with a missing hand, and a bow taller than she is. She asks you to show her how to hold her stance better, and you spend the afternoon correcting her elbow and posture until she no longer tips sideways. "I want to be like you," she says. "Don't." You reply, "Be like you, but better." She nods, as if that makes perfect sense, and you hope she remembers it. When the world tries to shape her into someone else, word reaches you of a mountain where thunder has stopped falling. Priests claim a god has abandoned it. Mortals climb to leave offerings, and nothing happens. You go. Of course, not to fix it, just to see. The mountain is steeper than you remember. Your legs still work, but the climb bites deeper now. Each step its own negotiation. Near the top, you find shrines built from whatever climbers could carry driftwood. Teeth, bones, coins. From half a dozen collapsed economies, you add a pebble shaped like an ear. Why not? It's as sacred as anything else. The summit is quiet. No lightning. No voices. Just wind. You sit for a long while, watching clouds crawl across the valley like tired animals. You don't pray, but you whisper a name, Megara, and the wind shifts just slightly. Warm for a moment. Maybe that's all the gods are now echoes caught in geography. You make your way back down slower. Knees, reminding you that even demigods have limits. You meet a shepherd who recognizes you by the lion's pelt. He tells you his sheep dream of fires. You nod. That tracks. He offers you cheese wrapped in fig leaves. You thank him and eat it while he recounts the tale of your fight with the Erymanthian boar. In his version, the boar outsmarts you, and the two of you share a drink afterward. You don't correct him. You've come to prefer the versions where you lose with grace. In a dry canyon, 2 days later, you find a statue of yourself, 20 feet tall, arms outstretched, expression carved to look both heroic and terribly constipated. The plaque reads Heracles, slayer of all things. You snort. You spend an hour chiseling away the all until it reads simply many. Then you walk on, at a crossroads near Corinth. An old woman offers you a prophecy. "One more labor," she says, "but it won't be called that." You raise an eyebrow. "Let me guess, no weapons." "No help. No witnesses." She grins. "Missing several teeth." "Exactly." You nod. "Of course it is." You give her the clay wave token. She doesn't ask what it means, just slips it into her pouch and hums a tune that might be older than you are. You descend into a coastal region where fishing villages rise like barnacles along the cliffs. Here, people speak in half-sung dialects and tell stories with stones arranged in sand. You stay 3 nights, helping rebuild a seawall. On the last day, a boy falls into the surf. You jump in without thinking, lift him out, and carry him back to his mother. She thanks you in the way only a parent can, by wrapping both arms around you and shaking with relief. Later that evening, she leaves a cup of tea on your doorstep and says nothing else. The gods grow quieter now. You hear their voices less often, feel their presence only in dreams and old habits. Olympus still shines above the clouds, but its halls are emptier, the feasts quieter, the laughter strained. You wonder if they're growing tired too, or if they've simply started watching from farther away. You return to your apple tree, sit beneath its now bare branches. A single blossom lingers where a fruit once hung. pale and new. You stare at it a long time. Then you do something you haven't done in decades. You die. With bare hands. You plant a new seed beside the tree and whisper something only the roots will remember. As you sit, someone approaches. A young man. Broad-shouldered. Uncertain in his stride. He asks, "Are you Heracles, you say?" Sometimes. He holds out a scroll. "I've been rewriting your labors." You glance at it. The ink is messy. The lines uneven. "Good." You say, "Make them yours." Hesitates. "But what if I get it wrong?" You smile. Everyone does. That's how you know you're getting close. He leaves. Scroll in hand. And you close your eyes as the breeze picks up, rustling the blossom overhead. You think of lions, of rivers, two of giants, with 3 faces and mothers who waited too long. You think of Hera, of Atlas, of Eurystheus hiding in his jar. You think of gods playing dice with mortal hearts and mortals who keep walking anyway. You think of olive branches, plum tokens, carved buttons, and fig-wrapped cheese. You think of a girl with one hand and a boy who sings off-key. And you stay there a while. Not as a hero, not as a myth, not even as a god, just as a man, sitting beneath a tree, choosing to remember. You leave the apple tree behind, though its roots linger in your bones. The road is quiet again, the kind of quiet that feels earned. No thunder in the distance. No kings bellowing commands. No monsters snorting through the underbrush. Just the sound of sandals scraping dust and the occasional bird that doesn't mind your company. You pass through villages where no one recognizes you, and it feels like freedom. A boy offers you a handful of olives and doesn't ask your name. A girl asks if you're lost. You say, "Not today." Still, the silence carries something beneath it. A new kind of hum. You start to hear it in taverns, in gossip, in the lilt of traveling minstrels. Your name. Not as a god. Not as a legend. But as a product. You pass a mural painted on the side of a grain store, your face, exaggerated and beaming, holding a jar labeled Heracles, O's breakfast of heroes. You nearly trip. In another town, they sell sandals worn by Heracles himself, stitched with golden thread and absolutely not suited for real walking. The tavern you sleep in has a drink called the Nemean Knockout. It tastes like spoiled citrus and ambition. You drink too anyway. At first, you laugh. Then, you start to wonder, because the stories you bled for are now shaped by market stalls and wine ads. You ask a merchant why he sells statues of you holding a bow. "I hated the bow." You mutter and he shrugs. "It sells better than the club." When you press, he says, "You're more idea than man now." You don't know if that's a compliment or a warning. You walk inland. A storyteller invites you to his fireside. He recites your labors in rhyme, adding details you don't recognize. You nod until he says, "And then Heracles slew his wife to prove his loyalty to Olympus." You cough. "That's not how it went." He shrugs. "It's how people remember it." You sit with him for hours, correcting, softening, removing the cruelty added for drama. When he asks why you care, you say, "Because someone else is going to hear that and think violence makes them righteous." He scratches his head. "But you were violent." You nod. I was also broken. Afraid. Wrong more times than I got it right. He doesn't understand. Most don't. But he rewrites it anyway. Farther down the road, you come upon a stone circle with offerings placed at the center coins. Bones. And a child's drawing of you holding a flower. It hits harder than any monster ever did. You kneel. Not to pray, but to rest. You whisper, "Thank you," and keep going. One afternoon, a man greets you by name and asks if you'd like to teach what you ask. How to be brave. He says. You nearly laugh, but you follow him. He runs a school carved into a cliff face. All natural light and chalk dust. The students are young, eager, with hearts still soft and knuckles still unbloodied. You tell them bravery is not loud. It's not muscles or battle cries. It's what happens in silence. When you choose not to raise your hand, when you stay, when you walk away, you show them how to lift stones without breaking their backs. You show them how to listen when a god whispers something they don't want to hear. You stay for 2 months. And when you leave, they carve your name into the wall. Not big, not fancy, just enough to say you were there, and then the summons comes. From a temple you've never visited, atop a cliff you've never climbed. They say it was built for you, but you had no part in it. Inside is a mural showing all your labors in gold and lapis. But something's wrong. You're alone in every panel. No Iolaus. No Athena. No centaurs. No shadows. Just you. Flawless and isolated. You stare at it for a long time. The priest approaches, bowing too deeply. You like it, he asks. It's beautiful. You say, but it's a lie. He stiffens. We thought it honored your strength. It erases my truth. He opens his mouth, closes it. You ask him to add another mural. One that shows failure. One that shows fear. He hesitates, but finally nods. When you leave, you hope he follows through. You'll never know. That's how trust works. You return to Olympus for what you think will be the last time. The halls are quieter now. Zeus nods once and says, "You've changed." You reply, "You haven't." He laughs. That old thunderclap sound. You embrace Hebe. Long and slow. She asks if you're staying. You shake your head. There's still work below. You visit the apple tree one more time. It's grown taller, wiser. Somehow, there's a child asleep beneath it, clutching a toy lion. You sit beside her and wait until she wakes. She looks up and says, "Are you a god?" You say, "No, just someone who remembers." She nods. Already, half forgetting you. That's fine. That's good. You move on again, into the mountains where no roads go, where the air is thin and full of memory. A wind carries, whispers your name, your stories, your mistakes, and your moments of grace. You walk into them like mist, letting them wash over you, through you, reshape you. You think of the ones you lost. Megara, Iolaus, Deianira. You wonder if they would have liked the man you've become. Probably. You weren't easy to love, but you tried. And sometimes, trying counts for something. You carry a pouch full of tokens, clay waves, lion buttons, feathers, scrolls, a cherry pit. You carry stories. both yours and others. You carry your name like a pebble in your boot, familiar, annoying, part of you now. And you carry one more thing, too, the knowledge that even if gods forget, mortals remember, not always perfectly, but enough. You step onto a high ridge and see the sea beyond. The same sea that once tried to drown you, the same sea that once carried your laughter. You breathe deep, salt and time. You sit down. You listen. The world doesn't need another hero. But maybe, just maybe, it still needs you. Section 20. The wind is different tonight. Softer. Slower. Like it's remembering a tune it forgot long ago. You walk beneath a sky, laced with stars you once mistook for gods, and gods you once mistook for stars. The road before you winds through ancient hills, and though the stones are sharp and the incline steep, your body moves with that old rhythm left, right. Breathe. Remember, each step is quiet now. No monsters, no kings, no cursed labors, just you, alone again. But not the same kind of alone as before. This kind of alone feels chosen. Your name has become something more than you. Heracles, a title, a brand, a metaphor on the tongues of people who've never touched a sword, but know what it means to carry a burden too long. They use your name when they lift heavy things, when they speak of impossible odds, when they stand between the world and someone they love. And somewhere in all that, the real you floats like dust in wine, present, even when invisible. You find a cave on the side of a hill and step inside. It's dry, empty, except for a few goat droppings and a rusted cooking pot. You sit by the wall, unwrap some bread from a cloth, and eat slowly. There's no rush now. You've outrun time. Outlasted Olympus, outsmarted myth, even Hera, whose vendetta once burned across the sky, seems to have let go. You think you caught a glimpse of her yesterday, her form reflected in the surface of a spring. Eyes softer than you remember. Maybe she's tired too. You unroll the scroll the young man gave you. His version of your labors is full of mistakes and exaggerations. In his telling, the Hydra was 50 heads. The stable muck was alive. And Cerberus whispered, riddles instead of growling. It's ridiculous. It's brilliant. You chuckle. Then, you take up your own charcoal stub and start to annotate it. You don't erase. You just add. Almost slipped on a skull here. You write. Was crying during this part. The lion's breath smelled like old olives. You don't write for glory now. You write for truth. Even if it's clumsy, even if no one ever reads it, you pass a spring in the woods where a child is playing, tossing stones and naming each one. This is the moon, she says. This is the wind. She holds one up and says, this is Heracles. You ask her what he does. She says, he makes monsters sad. You smile. That sounds about right. She asks who you are. You say, I'm someone who remembers him. She nods, satisfied. When she runs back to her village, you stay a while longer, watching the water ripple around the stones. You place one more in the spring, not named, not claimed, just placed. You don't need to leave your mark anymore. The earth remembers where your feet have been. You walk again. You pass an old battlefield now, overgrown with wheat. The ghosts here are tired, but they nod at you in recognition. Not as a god, not as a killer, but as someone who knows what it's like to carry memory like a wound. You bow back. In a town carved into the cliffside, you spend a week teaching children how to lift properly. No one wants a thrown-out back at 10. You show them how to weave rope that doesn't fray, how to light a fire in the rain, how to admit when you're scared. One girl asks if you were ever afraid of dying. You say, "Every day." She asks, "Did it get easier?" You pause, then say, "It got familiar." That's good enough for her. One morning, a man asks if he can take your portrait. You agree. But when he's done, the image doesn't look like you at all. Younger, sterner, heroic in a way that doesn't feel real. He asks if it's accurate. You say, "It's one of the versions." You leave, again, as you always do, before the sun rises. You walk through silence until you reach the coast. The sea breathes out a song only the old waves know. You sit on a flat rock and listen. All your labors, all your scars, all your triumphs and humiliations, they become water. Slow and deep and full of light. You can see them now without flinching. You no longer measure your worth by what you conquered. You measure it by what you carried and what you set down. Your last labor is not a beast, not a king's command. It's letting the world move on without needing to hold it up. Atlas gave it back to you once. Remember. And now you finally understand why. It was never about strength. It was about trust. Letting go. You plant the last seed. You don't know what will grow from it. But someone will, and when they ask who taught you how to dig, how to endure, how to breathe beneath the weight of the sky, you hope they speak your name. Not as a god, not as a hero, but as a reminder that even the strongest once fell, once cried, once laughed so hard they dropped a Hydra tooth down a well, and then stood up again, because that's all you ever did. Stand up, again, and again. The air is quiet now, softer than before, like the earth itself has exhaled and settled into sleep. You lie back beneath the stars, the familiar weight of the lion's pelt behind your head, and let your breathing slow. The stories have all been told, the labors finished, the gods silenced. There's nothing left to prove, just the hush of wind over stone, the faint creak of distant trees, and the warmth of everything you endured lingering beneath your skin. You think of all the places your feet have touched, all the hands that helped you, all the lives you crossed, shaped, and left behind. You don't need monuments. The world remembers in its own quiet ways, in blooming apple trees, in carved buttons passed between generations, in songs sung slightly off-key around hearth fires. You're still out there. In all of it. In every child who picks up a stone, in every whisper that carries your name with a smile instead of fear, in every broken thing that chooses to stand back up. So breathe. Let your muscles release. Let the night take you. There's no more to fight, no more to prove. Just the soft rustle of sleep pulling you under. Slow and steady, the stars are watching. And they remember. They always do. Sweet dreams.